Clara Whitfield did not cry when Ethan Walker turned her away at the station. She had survived worse. She picked up her suitcase, straightened her spine, and started walking, because a woman who had already lost everything learns fast that dignity is the only thing no one can take. She had sold her mother's silver brooch to buy that train ticket. She had crossed 3 states on a wooden bench with nothing but a worn Bible and a letter from a man who said he needed her, and he had looked at her like she was nothing. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very last word, because what happens next will stay with you for a long time. Drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The train had barely slowed to a stop when Clara Whitfield saw him. She knew it was Ethan Walker before he said a single word. He stood at the far end of the Cedar Hollow platform, with his hat pulled low and his arms crossed over his chest, not the posture of a man who had been counting the days. The posture of a man who had already made a decision and was working up the nerve to say it out loud. Clara had pictured this moment 100 times on the long ride from Illinois. She had met, nervous and awkward and sweet. The way first meetings between strangers sometimes are when both people want the same thing badly enough to be kind about the wanting. She had not pictured this. She had not pictured a jaw set like iron and eyes that refused to quite meet hers. She stepped down from the train car, holding her suitcase in both hands. The platform was dusty and loud with other passengers moving around her, but she walked straight toward him because Clara Whitfield had never once in her 23 years of living let fear make her feet stop working. He took off his hat when she reached him. That much at least he did. "Miss Whitfield," he said. "Mr. Walker," she said. How was taller than she expected. Broader across the shoulders. His face was weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors, not old, but marked the way. Good leather gets marked by years of hard use. He had brown eyes that might have been warm in a different moment. Right now, they were careful, guarded. The eyes of a man standing at the edge of something he had decided not to cross. "I appreciate you making the journey," he said. Clara waited. She had learned early in life that the words people put before what they actually mean are almost always longer than the thing they actually mean. She let him have his length. "I owe you an explanation," he said. He turned his hat in his hands. "I wrote those letters. I meant them when I wrote them. I believed I was ready." He stopped, started again. "I am not ready, Miss Whitfield. I thought I was, and I was wrong, and I am sorry for the cost that mistake has caused you. I will pay for your return passage, whatever you need, but I cannot. I am not able to proceed with the arrangement." Clara stood very still. She had traveled 4 days on a train that smelled of coal smoke and unwashed bodies. She had eaten 1 meal a day to stretch the small amount of money she had left after buying her ticket. She had sat upright for most of the journey, because sleeping on those hard benches made her back ache so badly she preferred the wakefulness. She had arrived in a town she had never seen with a man she had never met, being the only thing waiting for her on the other side. And he was sending her back. "I see," she said. Her voice was steady. She had worked very hard over the past several years at keeping her voice steady in moments when the rest of her wanted to come apart. "I truly am sorry," Ethan said. "You seem like a fine woman. This is not a reflection of your Mr. Walker." Her tone was quiet, but it stopped him. "You do not need to explain further. I understand." He looked at her for the first time then. Really looked. And she watched something move across his face that she could not quite name. Not guilt exactly, though guilt was part of it. Something older than guilt. Something that had been living in him a long time. "I'll arrange for your ticket first thing in the morning," he said. "That is kind of you," Clara said. She turned to go. She had taken 3 steps when she heard it. It was small. Barely louder than the wind picking at the dust along the platform. But it cut through the noise of the station, the way certain sounds do, the kind your body hears before your mind catches up. "Please." Clara stopped. She turned. Standing at the edge of the platform, half behind a post, as though she had been hiding, there was a little girl, 6 years old, maybe 7. She had blonde hair that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in a week, tangled in the wind and stuck to her tear-wet cheeks. Her dress was faded blue calico, too small for her, now the hem coming undone at one side. She had her father's careful brown eyes, but where his were guarded, hers were completely open, the kind of open that only belongs to children who haven't yet learned that openness can be a dangerous thing to offer a stranger. She was looking at Clara like she was something precious and disappearing. "Please," she said again, and "don't go." Clara felt her chest pull tight. She crossed to the child and crouched down so they were eye to eye. Up close, she could see that the girl had been crying for a while before this. Not new tears, but the dried tracks of old ones on her face, and new ones filling in the channels. "Hello?" Clara said softly. "Hello?" the girl whispered. "What's your name?" "Lily. That's a beautiful name." Lily looked at her with those wide, wrecked eyes. Then she reached out and took Clara's hand in both of hers, small hands with dirt under the nails and a scrape across the knuckles that someone had forgotten to clean properly, and she held on like she knew exactly what she was doing. "Be my mommy," Lily said. The words landed somewhere deep in Clara's chest and didn't move. She heard Ethan Walker's sharp intake of breath behind her. She heard him say low and rough, "Lily," and she heard the girl ignore him completely, the way children do when they have decided something matters more than being obedient. Clara looked at this child, this motherless, fierce, tangled-haired little girl who had just asked a complete stranger for the one thing she needed most in the world. And she could not make herself stand up and walk away. She looked back over her shoulder at Ethan Walker. He was standing with his hat in his hands and an expression on his face that she could not read, complicated in the way of a man who had spent years building walls and just watched a 6-year-old walk straight through them without even trying. "Mr. Walker," Clara said, "I believe we may need to renegotiate our arrangement." He opened his mouth, closed it. "Miss Whitfield, I am not asking to be your wife," she said. She stood, but she kept Lily's hand in hers. "Not today. Not before we know anything about each other. That would be foolish, and I have never been a foolish woman." She looked at him steadily. "But I am also not getting back on a train when your daughter is standing here asking me to stay. That is not something I am willing to do." Ethan Walker stared at her. "I don't have a position to offer you," he said finally. "The ranch it's not what it was." "I am not asking about the ranch," Clara said. "I am asking if there is a room, a small one. I don't require much. And I am asking if you will give me the chance to be useful before you decide I am not worth the space I take up." Something shifted in his face. "1 week?" he said. It sounded like it cost him something. "1 week," Clara agreed. "And after that, we will both decide honestly what makes the most sense." Lily looked up at Clara with the enormous relief of a child who has just been handed something she was terrified she was about to lose. She squeezed Clara's hand so tight it almost hurt. Clara squeezed back. They rode to the Walker Ranch in near silence. Ethan drove the wagon. Clara sat beside him with Lily pressed against her side. The child had climbed up between them without asking permission, and neither adult had tried to move her. The Montana sky above them was wide and pale gold, with late afternoon light, and the land rolled out in every direction, with the kind of space that made a person feel very small and very free at the same time. Clara had grown up on a farm in Illinois. She understood land. She understood the particular ache of watching something that should be abundant begin to go thin and tired. She had seen it in her father's face in the years before the debt swallowed everything. She recognized the same exhaustion in the Walker Ranch the moment they turned off the main road and she saw the state of the fences. She said nothing. She filed it away. The ranch house itself was solid, built to last by someone who had known what they were doing. But it had the look of a place where the care had been falling behind for a long time. Not neglect exactly, more like a man who had too many things to hold and had to keep letting something go to hold the rest. Ethan showed her to a small room off the kitchen. A cot, a window that faced west, a hook on the wall for her coat. It was plain and clean, and Clara thought it was just fine. "Supper's usually at 6, he said from the doorway. He didn't come inside. He kept his hand on the frame. "You don't have to cook. Rosa comes in 3 days a week." I am happy to cook, Clara said. You don't have to, Mr. Walker. She set her suitcase on the cot and turned to face him. I did not travel 1,000 miles to sit in a small room and wait for someone to tell me I have permission to be useful. If there is food in the kitchen, I will cook supper. If there are records that need organizing, I will organize them. That is how I am made. I am telling you this now, so that you are not surprised by it later. He looked at her for a long moment. Fair enough, he said. And he left. Lily appeared in the doorway the second her father's boots hit the hallway. Do you know how to make biscuits? She asked. Clara unpacked her Bible and set it on the windowsill. I do. Papa burns them. Most men do. Lily came into the room and sat on the edge of the cot and watched Clara unpack with the focused attention of a child who had decided this was the most interesting thing happening in the world. Where did you come from? She asked. Illinois. Is that far? About 1,000 miles. Lily thought about this. Did you ride a horse the whole way? A train. For 1,000 miles. For 4 days. Lily's eyes went wide. Were you scared? Clara paused. She thought about the honest answer versus the easy answer. She had always believed children deserved honest answers. A little, she said. I had never been this far from home before. I've never been anywhere, Lily said. Papa says when I'm bigger. She picked at a loose thread on the quilt. He says that about a lot of things. What kinds of things? Lily shrugged the small, complicated shrug of a child who has learned to package certain feelings into as little space as possible. He says when I'm bigger, we'll go to the county fair. And when I'm bigger, he'll teach me to ride properly, not just the old gelding in the paddock. And when I'm bigger, things will be... She stopped. He says when I'm bigger a lot. Clara looked at her. And right now, what do you need right now? Lily looked up. I need someone to brush my hair, she said. Papa tries, but he doesn't know how, and it pulls. Clara crossed to her suitcase and found her hairbrush. She sat down on the cot beside Lily, and the little girl turned her back without being asked, and Clara began working through the tangles very carefully, the way her own mother had once done for her, starting at the ends, and working up so it didn't pull. Lily made a small sound of relief. Better, Clara asked. Mom, Lily said. Then after a moment, are you going to stay? Clara kept brushing. I don't know yet, she said. Your father and I are going to talk more. We are going to figure out what is best. What's best is you staying, Lily said. You've known me for 2 hours. I knew right away, Lily said in the matter-of-fact way of children who have not yet learned to second-guess their own instincts. When I saw you get off the train, I knew you were different. Different how? Lily thought about it. You didn't look scared of him. Clara paused mid-brush. Is that unusual? People look scared of Papa, Lily said simply. He doesn't mean to. He just looks... She searched for the word. Big. He is big. And loud sometimes, when things go wrong with the cattle or the fences. Lily glanced back at her. He's not mean. He's just sad. Clara resumed brushing. How long has he been sad? Since Mama died. Lily's voice didn't crack when she said it. It was a fact she had lived with long enough to have made a kind of peace with. I was 3. I don't really remember her. I remember her smell, like lavender. She paused. Do you smell like lavender? Soap and train smoke, I'm afraid. Lily giggled. It was such a sudden bright sound in that quiet room that Clara felt something loosen in her own chest, something she hadn't realized was wound tight. She finished the braid and tied it with a piece of ribbon from her suitcase blue, because it matched Lily's dress, and Lily ran her fingers over it with the satisfaction of someone who had been given something simple and exactly right. Thank you, she said seriously. You're welcome, Clara said, just as seriously. Lily hopped off the cot. I'll tell Papa you're making biscuits. I haven't started yet. I'll tell him anyway, Lily said, and ran out. Clara sat alone for the moment in the small room with the west-facing window. The light had gone deep amber, the kind of light that made everything look like it had been there for 100 years. She could hear faintly the sound of cattle, somewhere out across the land, and the creak of the house settling, and somewhere nearby, Lily's feet on the floorboards running. She picked up her Bible from the windowsill. She didn't open it. She just held it the way you hold something that has traveled with you long enough to feel like a hand. She had come here expecting a husband. She had been turned away before she even set foot on the property. By all reasonable measure, this was a disaster, the kind of disaster that would take months to recover from financially and otherwise. And yet, she set the Bible down and went to find the kitchen. The kitchen was large and functional, and badly in need of reorganization. Clara located the flour and the lard and the buttermilk and began. She had been cooking since she was 8 years old. Her hands knew what to do without her having to think about it, which left her mind free to take stock of what she had walked into. The records she had glimpsed stacked on the table in the front room. The fences she had seen from the wagon. The way Ethan Walker moved through his own house, not like a man who owned it, but like a man who was holding it together through sheer determination and getting more tired every year. The face he made when he looked at his daughter full of love and shot through with a fear so deep it had calcified into the way he held his whole body. He was not a bad man. Clara had met bad men. She could read them quickly because she had needed to. Ethan Walker was not one. He was a frightened man who had loved someone and lost her and spent 3 years trying to carry everything alone, and the weight of it had ground him down to something hard and careful and very, very guarded. She thought about his eyes when Lily said, "Be my mommy." The way the guard had cracked just for a second. Just enough. She was not thinking about love. Love was not a luxury she had the time or the safety to think about right now. What she was thinking about was this: a little girl who needed someone to brush her hair. A ranch that was bleeding money it didn't have. A man who needed help he was too proud to ask for. And a woman who had spent her whole life being useful to everyone except herself. The biscuits went into the oven. Ethan Walker appeared in the kitchen doorway at 10 minutes to 6. He stopped when he saw the state of the counter. Organized flour dusted a pot of beans already on the stove, and he had the expression of a man who has come into a room expecting one thing and found another entirely. "You didn't have to," he started. "I know," Clara said without turning around. "But the beans were going to go another day without anyone paying attention to them, and that seemed wasteful." A pause. "Rosa comes Thursday," he said. "Thursday is 2 days away." Another pause. "I owe you more than I can reasonably repay," he said. His voice had shifted. Lower. The guard was still there, but it had moved slightly, like a door that has been pushed partway open. "Coming all this way. And then what happened at the station?" Clara turned around. She looked at him across the kitchen. "Mr. Walker, I am not interested in being owed. I am interested in being useful and being honest. Those are the 2 things I know how to do well." She held his gaze. "If you want to repay me for anything, be honest with me. About the ranch. About what you need. About what you're actually afraid of." He went very still. "I'm not afraid of anything," he said the way men say it when they are afraid of everything. Clara turned back to the oven. "Biscuits will be ready in 10 minutes, she said. "Call Lily for supper." He didn't move for a moment. She could feel him standing there, that particular weight of a person who is trying to figure out how to respond to being seen. Then she heard his boots on the floor moving away, and his voice calling Lily's name down the hall, and the thunder of small feet responding. They ate supper together, all 3 of them at the table, which Clara suspected Ethan Walker hadn't done in some time, based on the slightly bewildered way he sat down in his own chair like a man relearning a habit. Lily talked almost constantly. She talked about the horses and the names she had given them, about a bird that had built a nest in the barn that she had been watching for 2 weeks, about a book she was partway through that someone in town had lent her, about a girl at church who had said something mean, and whether Clara thought she should say something back or let it go. "Let it go," Clara said. "Unless she says it again, then say something." Lily considered this with the gravitas of a 6-year-old working through a genuine ethical problem. "What should I say?" "Tell her you heard what she said, and you'd appreciate it if she didn't say it again. Plain and polite. Nothing mean back." "But what if she does it again after that?" "Then come talk to your father," Clara said. Lily looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Clara. He had an expression she couldn't quite name, something between surprised and grateful, and something more uncomfortable than either one. The expression of a man who has just realized someone else handled something that he should have handled himself and is not sure how to feel about the fact that she handled it better. "Your father will handle it," Clara said. Ethan cleared his throat. "Absolutely," he said. After supper, Lily helped clear the table without being asked, which Clara noted. A child who did chores without prompting was a child who had been trained by someone not recently probably, but once, with care. Ethan walked Clara to her room at the end of the hall. Not because it required an escort, it didn't, but because Clara suspected he was working up to something and hadn't gotten there yet. At her door, he stopped. He put his hand on the frame again, the way he had before. Like the frame was something to hold on to. "I need you to understand something," he said. "All right," Clara said. "What I am offering you, room and board, a wage, honest work, that is what I can give. I cannot give." He stopped. "I do not want Lily to become attached to something that isn't going to be permanent. She has already lost one person. I cannot let her, Mr. Walker." He stopped. "I understand you are trying to protect her," Clara said. "And I respect that, truly." She kept her voice even. "But she is already attached. That happened in the first 2 minutes, and neither of us could have stopped it." She looked at him. "What I can promise you is this: I will not make Lily any promises I can't keep. And I will not pretend to be anything I am not. What happens beyond that will be decided day by day. That is all any of us can honestly offer." He looked at her for a long time. "You are not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" He almost smiled. It was there for just a second in the corner of his mouth before the guard pulled it back. "Someone easier to send away." Clara held his gaze. "I'm sorry to disappoint you." He shook his head, not in dismissal, but in something that might have been the first honest amusement she had seen from him. "You haven't," he said. And he walked away down the hall. Clara stood in the doorway of her small room. She could hear the ranch settling around her, the distant sound of the cattle, the wind against the window. Somewhere in the house, Lily humming something tuneless and content. The west-facing window was dark now, and through it, she could see stars beginning to appear in a sky so vast and uncluttered by anything man-made that it made the Illinois sky she had grown up under feel like a small, modest thing by comparison. She sat on the edge of her cot. She had come here expecting a husband and a future, and something she could count on. She had gotten a cot in a room off the kitchen, and a one-week arrangement with a man who was half-closed door, and a little girl who had grabbed her hand at a train station and asked her to stay. She should have been devastated. Instead, she sat there in the dark with the Montana stars filling up her window, and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. The particular quiet of a person who has arrived somewhere that might, against all probability and reason, be exactly the right place. She lay down without changing out of her dress. She put her hand flat on the worn cover of her Bible, and she closed her eyes. Down the hall, she heard a door open and close. She heard Ethan Walker's low voice saying goodnight to his daughter. She heard Lily's bright voice saying something back too muffled to make out the words, but the tone unmistakable. Happy. Settled. Like a child who has been worrying about something for a very long time and has just put it down. Clara listened until the house went quiet. Then she slept deeply, and without dreaming for the first time in months. She was up before the sun. It was something she had always done, a habit from the farm, from the years of helping her father with the morning chores before the school day started, from every chapter of her life that had required her to be ready before anyone else was awake. She dressed in the dark and went to the kitchen and built up the fire in the stove and put the coffee on. And by the time the sky outside the kitchen window had shifted from black to the deep blue-gray of very early morning, she had the kitchen in better order than she had found it, and was at the front room table going through the stack of papers she had noticed the night before. She knew she was overstepping. She did it anyway. Not because she was reckless. Clara Whitfield had never been reckless a day in her life, but because she was a woman who identified problems and addressed them. And what she was looking at in these papers was a problem that wanted very badly to be addressed. The ranch accounts were a wreck. Not dishonest. She could see that immediately. The numbers were all accounted for, every cent present, but disorganized in a way that made the underlying trouble invisible unless you knew what to look for. Unless you'd seen it before in a different set of books belonging to a different struggling piece of land. Clara had seen it before. She had watched it in her father's books in the 3 years before they lost the farm. The way the expenses crept up small, and then the income dropped just as small, and neither change was alarming on its own, and so neither got addressed. And then one day, the small additions and the small subtractions had quietly arranged themselves into a number that swallowed everything. She spread the papers out on the table and began sorting. She was still at it when she heard Ethan Walker's boots on the stairs at 5:30. He stopped at the bottom. She heard his footsteps pause, and then he appeared in the doorway of the front room and looked at her at his table with his papers spread around her and his lamp lit and a mug of coffee at her elbow that she had set out in case he came down. He looked at the coffee. He looked at the papers. He looked at her. "Those are," he started. "Yours, yes," Clara said. She didn't look up. "Sit down, Mr. Walker. I've made coffee. When you've had some and you're ready to talk, I'll tell you what I've found." A very long silence. Then she heard the chair pull out across from her and the soft sound of him wrapping his hands around the mug. She kept working. After several minutes, he said, "Well," she looked up. His face in the lamplight was guarded, but his eyes were alert, the eyes of a man who had been half expecting bad news for long enough that he had learned to meet it straight on. "You are not in immediate danger," she said. "But you are going to be in 6 months if nothing changes." She turned one of the pages toward him and pointed. "Your supply costs went up last spring. The merchant in town, Dawson." "Dawson, yes. He has been charging you roughly 14% above what comparable goods cost at the trading post in Billings. Did you know that?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't. Your cattle numbers from last fall are also recorded in 2 different ledgers, with 2 different totals. I don't know which is accurate. The difference is 11 head. She kept her voice matter-of-fact, not accusatory, just precise. "And you have 3 outstanding supply accounts from the spring that should have been settled and weren't not because you didn't have the money at the time, but because I don't think anyone tracked when they were due." The muscle in his jaw moved. "I should have been on top of those things," he said. "You have been running this ranch alone for 3 years," Clara said. "You have been managing cattle and fences and weather and a 6-year-old child and grief. The fact that you are still standing and the ranch is still standing is something, Mr. Walker, not nothing." She paused. "But you need help, and not just in the house." He looked at her across the table. The lamplight between them was warm, and everything outside the windows was still dark and very still, and the whole situation was strange enough. This woman he had refused sitting at his own table at 5:30 in the morning with his own papers spread in front of her, telling him things about his own ranch that he hadn't known that a man with less hard experience might have found it ridiculous or presumptuous. Ethan Walker did not find it either of those things. He found it in a way he hadn't expected and wasn't entirely sure what to do with something close to a relief so deep it almost frightened him. "1 week," he said. Clara nodded. 1 week. He picked up his coffee. "You ride?" he asked. She blinked. "I do." "Good," he said. He stood taking his coffee with him toward the door. "I'll show you the range after breakfast. You can't understand those numbers without seeing what they're attached to." He stopped at the door, turned back. "Thank you," he said, "for the coffee." "You're welcome," Clara said. He left. Clara looked down at the papers in front of her. She looked at the numbers that told the story of 3 years of a man trying to hold too many things at once. She thought about the fences she had seen from the wagon. She thought about a little girl who had run barefoot across a train platform and grabbed the hand of a stranger because she could not face losing one more person. She pulled a clean sheet of paper from the bottom of the stack. She picked up the pen. She began to write. The first morning became the second morning before Ethan Walker fully understood what had happened. Clara Whitfield had arrived as an arrangement he intended to end. She had stayed as something he didn't have a clean word for yet. and somewhere between the coffee she left out for him before sunrise and the 3 pages of corrected accounts she set on the front room table. By noon, the Walker Ranch had begun to feel for the first time in 3 years like a place that was being tended rather than merely endured. He didn't say that. He was not a man who said things like that. But he thought it riding out to the north fence line that first Tuesday morning with Clara beside him on the old roan mare, and Lily's voice still ringing in the yard behind them, calling out to be careful her version of a goodbye. "The northwest corner," Clara said without preamble. She had the paper she'd been working on folded in her coat pocket, and she pulled it out, now consulting it while the horse moved beneath her with an ease that told Ethan she hadn't been lying about knowing how to ride. That's where the supply numbers don't match what you're actually running. If the herd count is wrong, it's probably out here. Ethan looked at her sideways. "You drew a map of my ranch from an account ledger." "I drew an approximation," she said. "Tell me where I'm wrong." He took the paper, looked at it, handed it back. "You're not wrong," he said. She folded it without looking pleased about it. That was the thing he was beginning to notice about Clara Whitfield. She didn't perform her competence. She just applied it the way a person uses a tool they've been using for so long. They've forgotten there was ever a time when they didn't know how. They found the gap in the northwest fence before 8 in the morning. 3 rails down a section of post, rotted through at the base. Not new damage, old damage that had been holding on through stubbornness and had finally let go. Ethan crouched down to look at it. "How long?" Clara asked. 6 weeks, he said. "Maybe 8. I should have caught it in the fall inspection." "Were you doing fall inspections alone?" He didn't answer right away. "My foreman left in September," he said. "Took a position in Wyoming. Better pay." He stood. "I haven't replaced him." "You've been running this entire operation alone since September," Clara said. It was not a question. Her voice was flat and precise in the way of someone doing arithmetic in their head. "I have a hand who comes 3 days a week, and old Tom Briggs helps when his back isn't." "Ethan," she said his name, not Mr. Walker, his name plain and direct the first time she had used it, and it stopped him the way she'd probably intended. "You cannot run 400 acres of cattle range without a foreman. You know that." "I'm aware," he said tightly. "Then why haven't you hired one?" The answer sat in his chest like something lodged. He didn't pull it out. Not then. "I'll get the tools," he said. And he walked back to the wagon. Clara watched him go. She was learning him the way she learned everything, by paying attention, by holding what she observed, and letting it arrange itself into a picture without forcing it. The picture that was forming was of a man who had been holding the edges of his life so tightly for so long that he had forgotten the reason things sometimes needed to be held that way was because they were worth saving, not because holding tight was the point in itself. She helped him with the fence. He didn't ask her to. She simply took the other end of the rail when it needed 2 people and put her weight into it. And Ethan Walker looked at her with an expression she was starting to recognize, that particular look of a man recalibrating something he thought he had already figured out. They worked for 2 hours. Side by side in the wind, with the cattle moving somewhere out past the rise and the mountains enormous and indifferent on the horizon. At one point, he handed her a hammer without thinking about it reflexively, the way you hand a tool to someone you've been working beside for years, and she took it the same way, and neither of them said anything about it. By the time they rode back, the morning had opened up into something bright and cold and clear, and Lily was in the yard with a bucket trying to convince one of the barn cats to accept a bath, which the cat was opposing with extreme prejudice. "It's very dirty," Lily explained to Clara, as if the scratches on her arms required justification. "Cats clean themselves," Clara said, dismounting. "This one doesn't do a very good job." She'd disagree. Lily looked at the furious wet cat, reconsidering her life choices in the corner of the yard. "I'm going to name her Duchess." "That seems fitting," Clara said. Ethan watched this exchange from beside the wagon. He watched Lily's face, the animation in it, the ease. He watched the way she moved around Clara now with the relaxed confidence of a child who has decided at some deep-bone level that this person was safe. It had taken Lily 3 years to get comfortable around Rosa, the woman who came to cook. She had accepted Clara in approximately 48 hours. He didn't know how to feel about that. That was not quite true. He knew exactly how he felt about it. He felt something that scared him badly enough that he chose not to examine it too closely. He unhitched the wagon horse and went to the barn. Clara found him there 20 minutes later. She came in quietly and leaned against the post nearest him and waited until he looked up from what he was doing, which was oiling a harness that didn't particularly need oiling, which was what Ethan Walker apparently did when he needed to think without being watched. "You owe money to Harlan Briggs," she said. Ethan's hand stopped. "That's in the ledger," he said. "It's in the ledger. $80. Dated last March." He set down the harness. He rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. It was a short-term loan. The winter feed costs came in higher than Ethan. That direct use of his name again, like a hand on a shoulder. Harlan Briggs works for Caleb Thornton. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. He turned to look at her. "How do you know that?" he said. "Rosa told me," Clara said. "This morning before you came downstairs. She came early to drop off something she'd left behind last Thursday. We had coffee." She paused. "She's been wanting to tell you for months. She didn't think you'd want to hear it." Ethan's jaw worked. "Caleb Thornton," he said the way a person says a name when they're deciding how much to tell. "Who is he?" Clara asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's the largest landowner in Cascade County. Has been for 15 years. Bought up half the valley after the drought in '74 when families were desperate." He picked the harness back up, then set it down again. "He's wanted this land since my father's time. River access. The Walker property runs along the Yellowstone tributary for nearly a mile. Thornton's land doesn't touch water. Mine does. And the loan from Briggs," Clara said. "Briggs works for Thornton. Which means Thornton knows exactly how thin my margin is right now." Ethan's voice was flat. Not panicked. The voice of a man doing math he doesn't like the total of. "He's been patient. He's been waiting." "For what?" Ethan looked at her. "For me to get desperate enough to sell." Clara was quiet. "Are you?" she asked. "Desperate enough?" He held her gaze a long time. "No," he said. "Not yet." She heard the yet. She didn't press it. "Then we solve the $80 first," she said. "And the supply costs, and the foreman, one thing at a time." "Clara." He said her name the same way she said his plain and direct, not a courtesy, but a contact. "I can't pay you a real wage right now. What I have to offer." "I'm not asking about wages," she said. "I'm asking about what we're going to do about Caleb Thornton." He stared at her. Something happened on his face then. Something she hadn't seen before, not the guarded look, or the complicated look, or the look he got when she said something he hadn't expected. Something older and quieter than all of those. Something that looked briefly like the face of a man who has been standing alone in a fight for so long, he's nearly forgotten what it felt like to have someone on his side. "We," he said. "Yes," Clara said. "We." She pushed off the post and turned toward the barn door. "Come eat dinner. Lily's been calling for 10 minutes and I can hear her getting louder." She was already through the door when he said behind her very quietly, "Thank you." She didn't look back, but she heard it. She kept it. The days that followed moved fast. The way days do when there is too much to do and not enough time, which Clara had always privately considered the best kind of days, the kind that leave you tired at the end, in a way that feels like something earned. She reorganized the supply accounts. She wrote to the trading post in Billings for a price comparison. She found an error in the fall cattle tally and corrected it. The difference was 9 head, not 11, which meant 2 animals had been moved and not recorded and were currently in the south pasture where they technically weren't supposed to be. She told Ethan. He went and found them exactly where she said. He came back looking at her, the way people look at something they are still in the process of believing is real. Lily, meanwhile, had made it her personal mission to be wherever Clara was at all times. She followed her to the garden. She followed her to the supply room. She appeared at Clara's elbow in the kitchen with the regularity of a shadow, and asked a continuous, uninterrupted stream of questions about everything from how bread rises, to why some cows had spots and some didn't, to whether Clara had ever been in love. That last one came on a Thursday afternoon while they were shelling beans at the kitchen table. Lily's small hands working beside Clara's with the focused intensity she brought to everything. "Have you?" Lily asked. Clara kept shelling. "That's a personal question." "Rosa says you were supposed to marry Papa." "Rosa is correct." "But he said no." "He did." Lily considered this with great seriousness. "That was rude," she said finally. Clara pressed her lips together against a smile. "It was a little rude," she allowed. "I would have said yes," Lily said. "You're 6. "I'd still have said yes." Lily dropped a handful of beans into the bowl. "Are you sad that he said no?" Clara thought about the honest answer. "I was," she said. "For a little while." "And now?" "Now I'm shelling beans in Montana," Clara said. "Which is not what I planned, but plans change." Lily seemed to find this philosophically satisfying. She shelled in silence for a moment. Then, "I think Papa likes you." "Your Papa is being polite to a woman who showed up at his house and reorganized his papers without asking," Clara said. "That is not the same as liking someone." "He watched you walk across the yard this morning," Lily said. Clara paused her hands. "From the barn window," Lily added helpfully. "I saw him." "Lily, I'm just saying what I saw." "What you saw," Clara said carefully, "was your father making sure the yard was secure. He's a careful man." Lily gave her a look of such transparent skepticism for a 6-year-old that Clara had to look away to keep from laughing. The first real test came on Friday. Not from Ethan. From the town. Clara went into Cedar Hollow alone that morning, driving the supply wagon to pick up the week's provisions and drop off the letter she'd written to the Billings trading post. She had been in Montana less than 2 weeks. She did not yet know who to watch for in the way you learn in any small town, which faces belonged to which allegiances, which smiles covered which particular varieties of cruelty. She found out. She was at the dry goods counter when she felt the shift. The way the air in a room changes when something is about to happen. 2 women near the fabric rolls had stopped talking. A man by the door had turned. The proprietor behind the counter had a new expression, careful, apologetic, the look of a man who knew what was coming and wanted very much not to be associated with it. "You're the Walker woman," said a voice behind her. Clara turned. The woman was perhaps 40, dressed well, with the kind of mouth that had practiced saying unpleasant things for so many years, it had settled into a permanent shape for it. "I'm Clara Whitfield," Clara said. "I work at the Walker Ranch." "Work," the woman repeated in a tone that put quotation marks around the word like a pair of dirty hands. "That's right," Clara said. "We heard he turned you down," the woman said, not lowering her voice. "Not at all." "At the station. The whole town heard it." She looked at Clara with the bright, precise attention of someone who considers information about other people's humiliations a form of entertainment. "And yet here you are." "Here I am," Clara agreed. "It must be very difficult," the woman said with the expression of a person who did not find it difficult at all. "Traveling all that way, being refused, and then staying on anyway." A smile. "Some people have no pride, I suppose." The dry goods store was very quiet. Clara looked at this woman for a moment. She looked at the 2 near the fabric rolls watching. The man by the door watching. The proprietor with his apologetic eyes. "Ma'am," Clara said, and her voice was perfectly steady, perfectly civil, perfectly clear. "I have crossed 3 states on a wooden bench with $14 to my name to reach a man I had never met. I have repaired fences and corrected accounts and organized a household that needed organizing. I have done all of this in under 2 weeks." She held the woman's gaze. "What I don't have is the time or the interest to be embarrassed by things I didn't choose. The arrangement changed. I adapted." She turned back to the counter. "I'd like the provisions on this list, please," she said to the proprietor. Dead silence. Then from somewhere near the back of the store, an old man laughed, not unkindly, but with the particular appreciation of someone who has lived long enough to enjoy watching things said plainly. The woman with the practiced mouth left without buying what she'd come for. Clara loaded her wagon and drove back to the ranch with her spine straight and her hands quiet on the reins. Inside, something was shaking slightly. She did not let it show. When she got back to the ranch and was unloading the wagon, Ethan appeared from the barn to help without being asked. He took the heavier crates without comment. But after the second trip from the wagon to the house, he stopped. "Something happened in town," he said. It wasn't a question. "Nothing I couldn't handle," Clara said. "Clara." She set down her bag and looked at him. "A woman wanted me to be ashamed of being here. I declined." His jaw went tight. "Who?" he said. "I don't know her name." "Describe her." "Ethan, I handled it." "You shouldn't have to handle it," he said, and the sharpness in his voice surprised them both, she thought, because it was not the careful, guarded voice she had come to recognize. It was something underneath that, something less managed, something that was actually angry. Clara looked at him steadily. "Are you angry at the woman, or are you angry at yourself for putting me in a position where she had something to say?" The silence that followed had weight to it. "Both," he said finally. "That's honest," she said. "I appreciate honest." She picked up her bag. "The provisions need to go in the dry store, and I have something to tell you about the Billings price list, but that can wait until after supper." She went inside. Ethan stood in the yard for a moment. He stood there long enough that Lily appeared from around the corner of the house and looked up at him with the evaluating expression she'd inherited from somewhere he thought not from him, and said, "Are you in trouble?" "No," he said. "You looked like you're in trouble." "I'm thinking." "About Clara." "Lily." She tilted her head. "She's good for us, Papa." He looked down at his daughter. 6 years old. Messy braid that someone had tied with a blue ribbon. Eyes that saw too much, always had, even before she had words for what she was seeing. "Go wash your hands," he said. "It's almost supper." "That means yes," Lily said and went inside. Supper that night was quieter than usual. Ethan was thinking Clara could see it in the set of his shoulders, the deliberate way he worked through his meal. Lily, perhaps sensing the adult weather above her head, was more subdued than usual, though she ate her second biscuit with the focused satisfaction of someone engaged in serious work. After Lily was in bed, Ethan found Clara in the front room where she'd taken to sitting in the evenings with the accounts because the lamp there gave the best light. He sat down across from her. "I need to tell you something," he said. Clara set down her pen. "Caleb Thornton came by today," Ethan said, "while you were in town." She went still. "He heard you were here," Ethan said. "He made it a point to say he'd heard the arrangement fell through. He was very—" Ethan paused, choosing his word carefully, interested in how I intended to manage the ranch going forward. "What did you tell him?" "That I intended to manage it exactly as I always had." He looked at her. "He mentioned the casually, as a courtesy." The word courtesy came out flat. "He mentioned the 60-day note attached to it." "I didn't know there was a 60-day note. Briggs didn't." "Briggs didn't mention it," Clara said, "because Thornton didn't want you to know until it was useful for him that you knew." "Yes." "When does the 60 days start?" "March 3rd. Clara did the math. "That's 5 weeks away." "Yes." They looked at each other across the table. $80 in 5 weeks, Clara said. "Plus the spring supply costs," Ethan said, "which Dawson will expect settled before he extends the next order." "How much altogether?" "Around $230, he said. "If I sell 6 head before the spring market." "Spring market is 8 weeks out. The note is due in 5. "I know." She looked at him. He was holding himself very still, but it was not the stillness of a man who was calm. It was the stillness of a man who was keeping something extremely controlled because he didn't trust what would happen if he let it move. "This isn't an accident," Clara said. "Thornton timed this." "Yes. He knew you had a note coming due. He knew your margin was thin after winter. He's been watching your book somehow through Briggs, through someone at Dawson's store, I don't know. But he's been watching." She sat back. And he came here today not to collect. He came here to see if you knew." "And now I know," Ethan said. "And now we know," Clara corrected. That word again. We. She said it without thinking, and felt it settle in the air between them differently than it had in the barn. Heavier, more specific, like it had acquired a meaning on its way out that it hadn't started with. Ethan looked at her. "I have land," he said carefully. "The south quarter below the creek isn't part of the core range. I could sell—" "No," Clara said. He blinked. "You don't know what I was going to say. You were going to say you could sell the south quarter to cover the note, and then Thornton buys it from whoever you sell it to, which he's already arranged, and then he's got a foothold on your property line and the creek access he's been after." She held his gaze. "He's done this before. To the Delaney family in '69. Rosa told me." The look on his face was something she hadn't seen yet. Not the guarded look. Not even the complicated one. Something newer than those. "You've been in Cedar Hollow for 11 days, he said. "I am a quick study," Clara said. A long, strange pause. Then Ethan Walker did something she also hadn't seen yet. He laughed, a short, involuntary sound, genuine and a little raw, like something that had gotten loose before he could stop it. It transformed his face completely. For just that one moment, the years of careful guardedness fell away, and she saw the man underneath, younger than he seemed, and warmer, and somewhere inside, all that exhausted determination. Something that was still capable of finding a thing genuinely funny. It disappeared almost immediately, but she had seen it. "All right," he said. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Tell me what you're thinking." She told him. She had been working through it since the barn conversation. The cattle she'd identified in the South Pasture 9, head currently unaccounted for in the formal tally, could be registered and moved to the spring auction early in Billings, rather than at the county market, where Thornton had relationships getting a cleaner price. The difference between Dawson's prices and the Billings trading post was enough applied to the spring order to free up capital. And there was a third thing, smaller but sharper, a discrepancy in the fence maintenance contracts that suggested someone had been billing Ethan for work that was never fully completed. Not Thornton. Somebody local working their own angle. $60 over 2 seasons. Recoverable if he pushed. Ethan listened without interrupting. He asked 2 questions. Both were good questions, practical, specific. The questions of a man who understood his land and his business, and was simply missing information he hadn't had access to. When she finished, he was quiet. "It's not enough to make me comfortable," he said. "No," she agreed. "But it's enough to make the note and keep the land. And that buys time to make the rest of the decisions from a position of something other than desperation. You figured this out in 11 days. I figured it out in 4, she said. I've spent the last week checking that I was right." Another pause. "Clara." "Ethan." "Why?" he asked. And it was a real question, not rhetorical, not defensive. Genuine. Searching. "You don't owe me anything. You owe this ranch nothing. You had every reason to get on that train and never—" "You have a daughter," Clara said quietly, "who brushes her own hair now because I showed her how. Who laughs more than she did 2 weeks ago. Who follows me around this house with questions I love answering." She looked at him plainly. "That is the reason. It was always the reason. I told you that at the beginning, and I am telling you again." Ethan was very still. Something moved in his face. Under the surface. She could see it the way you can see water moving under ice, the shape of it without the detail. "You are a remarkable woman," he said, very quietly, like a fact he was reporting. Clara looked down at the papers in front of her. "Don't be kind to me because you feel you owe me something," she said. "I can't use kindness like that. It doesn't spend. I'm not." He leaned back. "I am stating what I observe, which is my right." A pause. "Even if you reorganized my papers without asking." "Your papers needed reorganizing." "They did," he agreed. She looked up and caught the very edge of something on his face, not quite the laugh from before, but a cousin to it, something trying to make its way out through the guardedness and nearly succeeding. She felt it in her chest before she could stop herself, She looked back down. "Get some sleep," she said. "We need to be in Billings by Thursday if we're going to catch the early auction registration." "Billings is 2 days out," he said. "Then we should leave Tuesday morning." She gathered the papers. "And you should tell Lily tonight, so she has time to negotiate terms for staying with Rosa." "Negotiate terms," he repeated. "She will have conditions," Clara said. "She is your daughter. It's better to address them early." He stood. He put his hat on, though he wasn't going outside, which she had noticed was something he did when he was thinking the hat, a kind of punctuation on a decision being made. "I'll tell her," he said. He walked toward the stairs. At the bottom step, he stopped without turning around. "For what it's worth," he said. Clara waited. The woman at the store, whoever she was. He paused. She was wrong. Clara kept her eyes on the papers. "I know," she said. He went upstairs. She sat alone in the lamplit room with the papers and the numbers and the particular quiet that settles over a house after everyone else has gone to sleep. The fire in the stove had burned down to coals. Outside, the wind had picked up. She could hear it working against the windows, testing them, the way Montana wind tested everything, looking for the places that needed holding. She listened to the house. She listened to the way it breathed around her, the timber shifting, the fire settling somewhere above her. The small sound of a floorboard as a 6-year-old padded back to bed from wherever she had been listening at the top of the stairs. Clara said nothing about the floorboard. She turned down the lamp. She gathered the papers and set them in order and went to her small room and sat on her cot and put her hand flat on her Bible and thought about her mother who had died when Clara was 15 and who had told her in those last careful weeks when she was choosing what to leave behind. In words, that a woman's worth was not a thing that could be assigned to her by someone else's refusal. At the time, Clara had been too young to understand what that fully meant. She understood it now. She lay down. She closed her eyes. She thought about a man who laughed for one unguarded second and then put the guard back and probably didn't know she'd seen the difference. She thought about Lily's hands, small and quick shelling beans. She thought about Caleb Thornton, patient and watching with his 60-day note and his careful timing and his absolute certainty that he knew how this was going to end. She thought, you don't know this ranch yet. You don't know what this ranch has in it now. And she slept. They left for Billings on Tuesday morning before the sun was fully up. Lily had negotiated her terms the night before. With the gravity of a small diplomat, she would stay with Rosa on 3 conditions. Rosa would let her help with the cooking. Nobody would touch the bird's nest in the barn while Clara was gone, and Clara would bring her back something from Billings, the nature of which Lily left deliberately unspecified, so as to preserve maximum flexibility. Ethan had agreed to all 3 without argument, which told Clara he was distracted. She filed that away. The road to Billings was long and cut through country that felt in the early morning cold like something that had existed before people and would exist long after. Ethan drove. Clara sat beside him with her coat buttoned to the throat and the account papers in a leather satchel on her lap, going over the numbers one more time, the way she always went over things one more time, because she had learned early that the mistake you didn't catch was always the one that mattered. They didn't talk for the first hour. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of 2 people who had moved past the stage where silence required filling. He broke it first. "Tell me about Illinois," he said. She looked up from the papers. He was watching the road, not her. His hands easy on the reins in the way of a man who had been driving wagons since before he had opinions about anything. "What do you want to know?" she asked. "Whatever you want to say." She thought about it. "My father had 120 acres outside of Decatur. Good land, good soil. He was a careful man, not careless the way some farmers get careless, believing one good year is the shape of all years." She paused. But careful didn't save him. The drought in '78 took 2 seasons back to back, and the bank took the rest. "When did he die?" 2 years ago, she said. 6 months after we lost the property. He held on until he didn't have anything left to hold on for. She said it plainly without bitterness, which was something she had worked at. "My mother went when I was 15. After that, it was the 2 of us managing. He taught me the books because he didn't have a son, and he wasn't going to let his land be run by someone who didn't understand what it cost. Ethan was quiet for the moment. "The man who was going to marry you," he said carefully. Before, Clara's hands stilled on the satchel. "His name was Robert Hadley," she said. "He came from a family with money, or what passed for money in Decatur." She kept her voice even. "We were engaged for 7 months. When my father's land went to the bank, Robert's family decided I was no longer a suitable match." She paused. "Robert didn't argue with them very hard." "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "Don't be," she said. "It clarified things considerably." She looked down at the papers again. "A man who leaves when the circumstances change was never someone worth staying for. I knew that eventually. It just took me longer than I would have liked." A beat. "Is that why you answered my letter?" he asked. She considered. "I answered your letter because you said partnership," she said. "Not help. Not a woman to manage the house. Partnership." She glanced at him. "Men who want a servant don't use that word. They don't even think to use it." Ethan kept his eyes on the road. But something in his jaw shifted the slow movement of a man absorbing something that has struck him more precisely than he expected. "I meant it," he said. "I know you did," she said. "That's why I'm sitting in this wagon." The auction registry in Billings opened at 8 in the morning, and Clara had the paperwork completed and the 9 head registered under the Walker Ranch mark before 9. The clerk was a young man who kept looking at her with the expression of someone waiting for the man she must certainly be representing to appear and take over. And each time he looked, she simply answered his next question and moved on. And by the end, he had given up waiting and was processing the registration with the efficient resignation of someone whose assumptions have been gently and thoroughly defeated. Ethan stood slightly behind her through most of it. Not deferring watching. The way he watched everything with that steady taking stock attention. But there was something different in it today. Less assessment. More something else she didn't want to name yet. Outside afterward he said, "You've done that before. Registered cattle. Handled a man who didn't think you should be handling it." "Every day of my adult life," she said. "You get faster at it." He almost smiled again. The corner thing. She was starting to look for it without meaning to. They went to the trading post next. The difference between the Billings prices and what Dawson had been charging in Cedar Hollow was laid out on paper in the trader's hand, even sharper than Clara had calculated. 14% on most supplies. Higher on some. The trader, a blunt woman named Mrs. Holt, who had been running the post since her husband died in 71, looked at the comparison figures Clara had brought and said very directly, "Your Cedar Hollow man has been robbing you polite." "He has," Clara agreed. "I can do you a standing order," Mrs. Holt said. "Freight delivery to Cedar Hollow twice monthly. Add 2% for delivery, you're still ahead by nearly 12. Ethan looked at Clara. "Take it," she said. He took it. They had the signed agreement in hand by noon. Standing on the Billings Main Street with the document folded in the satchel, the early auction registration secured, and 3 hours before they needed to start back. Ethan Walker looked at Clara Whitfield with an expression she had not seen on him before. It was uncomplicated. No layers, no guard working underneath it. Just a man looking at a woman, and not trying to be anything other than what he was in that moment, which was someone who had just watched something he thought might be lost turn out to be salvageable after all. "Dinner," he said. "The least I can do." "You don't owe me dinner," she said. "I know," he said. "I want to." She looked at him. "All right," she said. They ate at a small place, 2 streets off the main road, that Ethan knew from supply trips. Not fancy, just good. The kind of establishment that had been feeding working people for 20 years and had gotten very good at it. They sat across from each other at a corner table and ordered without looking at the menu, because Ethan already knew what was worth ordering, and Clara trusted his judgment about the things he knew. It was the first time they had sat across from each other without a problem between them. Without the accounts or the fence, or the Thornton situation arranged on the table like a third party that needed managing. It was just the two of them, and food, and the particular strangeness of being in a town where nobody knew who they were or what they were to each other, or what complicated thing had happened at a train station 3 weeks ago. "Tell me about her," Clara said. "Your wife." She watched him decide whether to answer. It took about 4 seconds. "Margaret," he said. "She was from Ohio originally. Came west with her family when she was 12. She was—" He stopped, picked up his coffee. "She was the kind of person who made things seem possible. You know, the kind where they walk into a room and somehow the room is better for it." He set the cup down. "Lily has that. That same thing. That quality." "She does," Clara said. "She died of fever," he said. "The winter of '79. It came fast. 3 days from first symptoms." He said it the way he'd said everything hard about himself, flat and direct, keeping it from spilling. "Lily was 3. I was—" He exhaled. "I was not prepared for what came after. I thought grief was a season. Something you moved through and came out the other side of." He looked at the table. "It's not a season. It's a restructuring. Everything gets moved." Clara said nothing. She let him have the space of it. "I wrote to you because Lily asked me to," he said. "She didn't ask directly. She was 5. She didn't know what a mail-order arrangement was. But she asked me one night why she didn't have a mama like the other girls at church. And I lay awake most of that night thinking about it." He looked up. "The letter took me 3 months to write. I threw it away twice." "But you sent it," Clara said. "I sent it," he agreed. "And then you wrote back, and you were the way you wrote. You didn't perform anything. You were just direct, practical. You asked good questions." Something moved on his face. "I thought I was ready. And then you got off that train and I—" He stopped. "You panicked," Clara said, without judgment. "I panicked," he said. "Because I was real," she said. "Letters are safe. A real person standing in front of you is not safe." He looked at her. "Yes," he said, quietly, like a confession. "Ethan." She held his gaze. "I am not Margaret. I am not a replacement for something you lost. I know that. You don't need to protect me from knowing that." He was very still. "What are you then?" he asked. She considered the honest answer. "Someone who is learning this ranch," she said. "And this man. And a little girl who follows me everywhere and asks better questions than most adults I've ever met." She looked at him steadily. "That's what I am right now. The rest can wait." Something settled in his face. Not resolution exactly, but the particular quality of attention being put down carefully, like something fragile you've been carrying too long. "That's fair," he said. "It's honest," she said, "which I find more useful than fair." They drove back in the late afternoon, with the satchel between them, full of signed agreements and corrected numbers, and the particular satisfaction of a hard problem, moved if not solved, at least in the right direction. Lily flew off the porch when they turned into the yard, demanding to know what Clara had brought and whether it was good, and Clara produced from her coat pocket a small cloth-bound book of illustrated stories that she'd found at a shop near the trading post, and Lily received it with the reverence of someone being handed something exactly right. Ethan watched his daughter's face. Then he watched Clara's face watching his daughter. He looked away before either of them could catch him at it. The trouble started 4 days later. It came quietly, the way the worst things usually do, not with a confrontation or a warning, but with a letter. Clara was in the kitchen when Ethan came in from the yard with it. She knew from the way he walked, that specific controlled stillness, the way he moved when he was managing something internally, that it was not ordinary mail. He set it on this table. She looked at it. The return address was a legal firm in Billings. "Open it," she said. He did. He read it once, set it down, read it again. Then he looked at Clara with an expression she had not seen on him before and did not like. "Thornton," he said. "He's filed a formal claim against the property." Clara went still. "On what grounds?" "The loan." Ethan's voice was controlled and flat, and underneath it something was burning. "Briggs has assigned the note to Thornton, legally. He bought the debt." He set the letter down. "And Thornton's lawyers are claiming the note was secured against the south pasture, as collateral." Was it? No. Hard. Absolute. The loan was unsecured. I have the original document. Then he's fabricating the collateral claim. Yes. He looked at her. But he's doing it with a Billings law firm and a judge who has ruled in his favor 3 times in the last 5 years. The kitchen was very quiet. Clara picked up the letter and read it. She read it twice the way she read everything that needed to be understood precisely. Her hands were steady. Her face was careful. He timed this, she said. Of course he did. Ethan's voice was clipped. The auction registration goes through in 10 days. He filed this before it clears. If the claim is upheld before clearance, the cattle sale could be tied up in the dispute, Clara said. And the land claim clouds the title. Suddenly, your operating agreements are in question. Your supply contracts are in question. Everything is in question, while his lawyers run the clock and the note comes due. She set the letter down. He's not trying to win in court. He's trying to make the situation untenable enough that you sell. I know what he's doing, Ethan said. His jaw was tight enough to break something. I've watched him do it to 3 other families. Then you know what comes next, Clara said. He looked at her. He'll come here, she said, in person, to offer you a way out. A price for the south pasture, just the south pasture, he'll say very reasonable, just to settle the matter. And the price will be slightly more than you expect, because he is not stupid and he wants you to take it. Because once he has the south pasture, he has the creek access and a foothold, and then this whole process starts again in 6 months, except from the inside. Ethan was staring at her. How do you know that? He said. Because I have read every account in your ledger for the past 5 years, Clara said. And because I know what a systematic man looks like when he moves. He moves the same way every time. He's been doing this for 20 years, and nobody has stopped him because every family he's targeted has been alone when he came for them. She picked up the letter again. You are not alone. The words landed. Ethan said nothing for a moment. Then, we need a lawyer. We need the right lawyer, Clara said. Not a Cedar Hollow lawyer, not someone Thornton has access to, she thought quickly. Mrs. Holt in Billings the Trading Post. She mentioned a name. An attorney she used when someone tried to dispute her water rights in '73. Said he was the only honest man in Cascade County with a law degree. Thomas Garrett, Ethan said. I know the name. Can you reach him? By wire, today. Then go, she said. Now, before Thornton does. Ethan grabbed his coat off the hook. At the door he stopped. Clara. She looked up. He held her gaze for 1 long second. Then he said, Keep Lily inside today. And he was gone. Clara stood alone in the kitchen with the letter on the table in front of her. She picked it up 1 more time. Read it 1 more time. Set it down. Then she went to find Lily. The little girl was in the front room with her new book lying on her stomach on the braided rug with her feet in the air, reading with the concentrated absorption of a child who has found something worth the full attention. She looked up when Clara came in. What's wrong? She said immediately. Clara sat down in the chair nearest her. Nothing you need to worry about, she said. Lily put down the book. Your face is doing the thing, she said. What thing? The thing where you're being calm on purpose. Clara looked at this child. 6 years old. She had her father's ability to read a room before anyone had said a word. Some men want to take the ranch, Clara said. She said it plainly because Lily deserved plain. Your father is going to town to get help to stop them. We're staying here. Lily sat up. Her face had gone serious, not frightened serious, which Clara recognized as the Walker family response to bad news. Is it Mr. Thornton? Lily asked. Clara went still. You know that name? He came here once, Lily said. Before you came. He stood in the yard and talked to Papa for a long time, and after he left, Papa didn't talk to anyone for the rest of the day. She looked at Clara with those clear reading eyes. I didn't like his hands. His hands. They were very clean, Lily said. For a rancher, his hands were too clean. Clara looked at her. You are an extraordinarily perceptive child, she said. Papa says it's exhausting, Lily said. Your papa is right, Clara said. Come help me in the kitchen. I want to have supper ready when he gets back." Ethan returned 3 hours later. He came in through the back door and went straight to the kitchen table and sat down and put both hands flat on the table, which was a posture Clara had come to recognize as his particular version of collecting himself. "Garrett will take the case," he said. "He knows Thornton. He's been waiting for someone to fight him properly for 7 years." Clara set a plate in front of him. "What does he need?" "The original loan document. The ledger records from the past 3 years. Anything showing the ranch's operating history, contracts, supply agreements, cattle registrations." He looked up. "Everything you've been organizing." Clara crossed to the sideboard where she had moved the organized files 2 weeks ago. She opened the second drawer. The files were there, perfectly ordered, dated, indexed. She brought them to the table and set them in front of him. Ethan looked at the files, then at her. "I organized them the first week," she said simply, "in case they were needed." He stared at her. "You didn't know any of this was going to happen," he said. "No," she agreed. "But a ranch with disorganized records is a ranch that can't defend itself. I organized them because it was the right thing to do." She sat down across from him. "It turns out we need them earlier than expected." He opened the top file. His hands on the documents were not steady, she noticed. Not visibly. You wouldn't know if you weren't looking for it. But she was looking. "Ethan." He looked up. "He has not won yet," she said. "He has filed a piece of paper, that is all. Paper can be answered with paper." She held his gaze. "Garrett knows the law. You know this land, and I know these numbers better than anyone in Cascade County, including Thornton's lawyers." She put her hands flat on the table, mirroring his posture from when he came in, and something in his face shifted when he saw it. Recognition, maybe, or something closer to what recognition can become when it has been accumulating long enough. "We are not alone in this." The muscle in his jaw moved. "You keep saying that," he said. "Because you keep needing to hear it," she said. A long, complicated silence. Then he looked down at the files and said, "Where did you put the spring supply contracts?" "Third folder," she said. "Behind the cattle tally." He found them. They worked at the table until past midnight. It was 2 days later when Caleb Thornton came to the Walker Ranch. Clara was in the yard when he arrived. She had seen men like him before. Not this particular man, but this particular kind. The kind who had been powerful long enough that they had forgotten how to enter a space without owning it first. He rode up on a very good horse and climbed down with the unhurried ease of a man who believed that time worked in his favor. How was perhaps 55, silver-haired, well-dressed in a way that was calculated not to look well-dressed. He had, as Lily had observed, very clean hands. He looked at Clara with the polite, patient expression of a man who expected to be redirected to the person he actually needed to speak with. "Good morning," he said. "I'm looking for Ethan Walker." "He's expecting you," Clara said. "I'm Clara Whitfield. I manage the Walker Ranch accounts." Something moved behind his eyes. Very fast. Gone before it fully formed. "Is that right?" he said. It was not a question. "It is," she said. "Mr. Walker is in the barn. He asked me to let you know he'll be out shortly." She gestured towards the porch. "You're welcome to wait." He didn't move toward the porch. "I don't believe we've met," he said with the tone of a man who has done his research and knows exactly who he's talking to. "No," she said. "You came with Walker from somewhere east." "I came on my own business," Clara said. "And I stayed on different business, the specific nature of which is between me and Mr. Walker." His smile didn't change. Underneath it, something was recalibrating. "There's a legal matter pending," he said conversationally. "Perhaps Walker's mentioned it. Nothing that needs to be complicated. A simple note, some easily resolved questions about the property boundary. These things happen between neighbors." "Between neighbors," Clara repeated. "That's right. Neighbors who file legal claims through Billings law firms without prior conversation," Clara said pleasantly. "That kind of neighbor." The smile went slightly still. "I'm sure Walker would rather resolve things directly," Thornton said. "Man to man, without involving outside parties. Lawyers make everything expensive and slow." Mr. Thornton, Clara said. She looked at him with the same pleasant steadiness. I am familiar with the situation. I have been familiar with it since the letter arrived. I am also familiar with the Delaney purchase in '69 and the Morrison property in '72, and the 2 Cascade County Court decisions in '75 that were both presided over by Judge Albright, who I understand is also the presiding judge in the current filing. She paused. Thomas Garrett has been retained. He asks that all further communication go through his office. Caleb Thornton looked at her. For the first time since he had ridden up the ease left his body. Not completely, he was too practiced for that. But something underneath the ease shifted. Thomas Garrett, he said. Yes. A beat. He's a difficult man, Thornton said. So I've heard, Clara said. Mr. Walker seems to consider that a recommendation. Thornton looked at her for a long moment. The calculating look. The look of a man reorganizing his understanding of a situation he thought he had mapped completely. Miss Whitfield, he said. Yes. You seem like an intelligent woman. Thank you, she said. Then I'll be plain, he said. What is happening on this ranch is not your business. You are not family here. You are not a wife. You are not whatever arrangement you've made. It is temporary by nature. This land dispute will outlast your presence here, and when it is resolved, it will be resolved between men who have history with this land. His voice was still pleasant. That was the particular skill of him. I would be careful about which side of this you attach yourself to. Clara held his gaze. Mr. Thornton, she said, I appreciate plain. She matched his pleasantness exactly. Here is mine. I have spent the last 3 weeks learning every account, every contract, every debt and asset of the Walker Ranch. I have the original loan document showing no collateral was secured. I have 3 years of operating records in perfect order. I have a Billings attorney who has been waiting for exactly this filing for 7 years. She looked at him steadily. And I am not temporary. The last 3 words were quiet. Certain. The voice of a woman who had decided something and was done deciding. The barn door opened and Ethan Walker came out. He walked across the yard and stood beside Clara. Not in front of her. Beside her. Shoulder almost to shoulder. Caleb, he said. Ethan, Thornton said. His eyes moved between them. Garrett's in contact with your firm, Ethan said. You've met Clara. We've been speaking, Thornton said. Good. Ethan's voice was level. Then you know where things stand. Thornton looked at them both. At Clara, then Ethan, then Clara again. At the particular way they were standing side by side, not touching, but with the specific quality of 2 people who had decided something together. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Thornton said. You filed a fraudulent collateral claim, Ethan said. I don't think I'm the one making anything harder than it needs to be. The claim is legal. The claim is fabricated, Ethan said. And Garrett has the documents to demonstrate that. A long pause. Thornton picked up his reins. I'll be in touch through the firm, he said. We'll be in touch through Garrett, Ethan said. Thornton looked at Clara one more time. One more second of that recalibrating look. Then he mounted his horse and rode out of the yard without hurrying, because men like him never hurried because hurrying suggested that something had gone differently than intended. They stood in the yard until the sound of the hooves had gone. Then Lily's voice came from the porch window where she had been watching with her chin on the sill. Is he gone? He's gone, Ethan said. Good, Lily said. His horse didn't like him either. She kept pulling sideways. Ethan looked at Clara. Clara looked at Ethan. She noticed that from the window, Clara said. She notices everything, Ethan said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you told him you weren't temporary. Yes, Clara said. A silence. The particular kind. Were you saying that to him? Ethan asked. Or to me? Clara looked at him. The Montana sky above them was enormous, and the yard was quiet, and somewhere in the barn a horse moved and stamped, and the whole world seemed to have paused around the question. Both, she said. He held her gaze. He didn't say anything, but something in his face, underneath the careful, underneath the guarded, underneath 3 years of hard-packed grief and loneliness, and the habit of carrying everything alone, something broke open. Quiet. No drama to it. The way ice breaks in spring, not with a crack, but with a slow, undeniable yielding to something warmer that has been working at it from beneath. He looked at her, the way a man looks at the thing he has been afraid to want for so long, that the wanting has become indistinguishable from the fear. Then Lily called from the porch that she was hungry, and the moment broke, and they both moved toward the house, and neither of them said what had just happened. But it had happened, and they both knew it. That night after Lily was asleep and the supper dishes were done, and Ethan was at the table writing to Garrett with the organized files spread around him, he stopped. He looked at the files, the perfect order of them. 3 years of records that had been chaos when Clara arrived and were now so precisely organized that he could find anything in 30 seconds. He thought about her standing in the yard with Thornton. He thought about her voice. "I am not temporary." He picked up his pen. He set it down. "Clara," he said. She looked up from across the table. "When this is over," he said. He stopped, started again. "When this is resolved, the legal matter, the auction, all of it, I want to talk to you. About something that isn't the ranch." She looked at him. "All right," she said. He nodded, picked up his pen, went back to the letter. Clara went back to the accounts, but her hands were not entirely steady, and she did not try to pretend they were. 3 miles away, in his large, well-ordered house, Caleb Thornton sat at his own desk with a glass of good whiskey and turned over what had happened in the Walker yard. He was not a man given to underestimating opponents. He had underestimated this one. He picked up his pen and wrote a letter of his own, not to his lawyers, to a man in Cedar Hollow who owed him a favor and had access to information that Thornton now understood was going to be necessary. He needed to know about Clara Whitfield. He needed to know everything, because if he could not move Ethan Walker off that land through legal pressure, there was more than one way to make a man question what and who he was standing beside. He sealed the letter. He smiled at nothing in particular, and he sent it. The letter from Thornton's man arrived in Cedar Hollow on a Wednesday. Clara didn't know about it until Sunday. The week between was the best week she had known since arriving in Montana. Garrett had responded to Ethan's wire with a detailed strategy. Calm, methodical. The kind of legal thinking that comes from a man who has been waiting for a specific fight for a long time and has had years to prepare for it. The original loan document was clean. No collateral clause. No ambiguity. Garrett said the fabricated claim would not survive a proper review, but the timeline mattered. They needed to get ahead of Thornton's judge before the filing gained procedural weight. The early auction registration in Billings cleared on Thursday. 9 head registered clean under the Walker mark. The sale date was set for the 2nd week of April. The capital from those 9 animals, combined with what the corrected supply agreements would free up, would cover the note with something left over. Not much, but something. Ethan had stood in the front room when the confirmation arrived and read it twice, and then put it on the table and put his hand over it flat, the way Clara had seen him do, with things he needed to be real. "We're going to make it," he said, not loud, almost to himself. "We're going to make it," Clara agreed. He looked at her across the room. That look again, the one she was getting better at reading, the one that lived underneath the careful exterior, like something warm and contained, and not yet ready to be named. Lily had appeared from the hallway at that exact moment, assessed the mood in the room with the speed of a child who had been reading adult atmospheres for her entire short life, and announced, "Can we have pie?" Ethan had laughed. The real one, not the involuntary half-second laugh she'd first heard in the barn, but a full sound, genuine and unguarded. And Lily had stared at her father with the bright, slightly stunned expression of a child hearing a laugh she recognized but had not heard in a very long time. Clara had gone to make pie. She had stood in the kitchen measuring flour with her hands, not quite steady, listening to Ethan and Lily in the other room. His low voice and her quick one, the back and forth of a father and daughter, relearning how to be easy with each other. And she had thought this. This is the thing worth staying for. Sunday changed everything. She heard it first from Rosa, who came in for her regular Thursday visit, looking troubled around the eyes in a way she was not bothering to hide. "I need to tell you something," Rosa said before she even set down her basket. "And I need you to hear it before someone else tells you in a way that's meant to hurt." Clara dried her hands. She sat down. She already knew in the way you sometimes know things before you know them. Some accumulation of small signals that the body processes before the mind catches up, that what Rosa was about to say was going to cost her something. "There's talk," Rosa said, "about you, in town." She kept her eyes steady on Clara's. "Thornton's man went through Cedar Hollow asking questions. About where you came from, about your family, about why you left Illinois." "And," Clara said. "And somebody wrote to Decatur," Rosa said. "Or Thornton's man did. I don't know exactly. But what came back?" She stopped. "People are saying Robert Hadley left you because of something you did. Not because of the farm, because of something you did." Clara went very still. "That is not what happened," she said. "I know that," Rosa said. "I believe you. But that's not the point, Clara. The point is that Thornton doesn't need the truth. He needs a story that makes this town question you. If they question you, they question everything you've done here, every agreement Ethan signed on your recommendation, every deal you negotiated. He makes Ethan look foolish for trusting you." Rosa's voice was careful and direct. "He can't beat you on the law, so he's going to try to beat you on your reputation." Clara's hands were flat on the table. She knew the shape of this. She had seen it work before, not on herself, but on her father, in the last years before the debt took everything. The way a town could turn. How quietly it happened. How a story that wasn't true could settle into the gaps of what people didn't know and fill them up so completely that the truth, when it came, had nowhere left to stand. "What are they saying specifically?" she asked. Rosa told her. The story. Thornton's man had assembled from Robert Hadley's family, from old neighbors, from anyone willing to talk for whatever reason people talked, was not precisely false. It was a selection. Clara had been engaged to Robert Hadley. Robert had broken the engagement when the farm failed. That much was true. What Thornton's version added was an implication never stated outright, just suggested the way the most damaging stories never state anything outright, that Clara had pursued Robert's family for their money, that she had misrepresented her family's financial situation, that the engagement itself was a calculated move by a woman who had made a habit of attaching herself to men of means and property. The irony of this version given, who had assembled it, and why, was not lost on Clara. She sat with it for a moment. "Does Ethan know?" she asked. "Not yet," Rosa said. "But he will. Someone will make sure he does." Clara nodded. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Her voice was steady. She was making it steady. "Can you stay for supper? I don't want Lily to be alone with this conversation." Rosa stayed. Clara cooked. She cooked the way she always did when she needed her hands to do something while her mind worked methodically, precisely the muscle memory of it freeing up the thinking part. She worked through it the way she worked through the accounts. Identifying the shape of the problem. Mapping the available responses. She could go to Ethan first. Tell him herself before the town did. Control the information. That was the strategic move. She thought about it and put it down. Not because it was wrong tactically, but because it was wrong in a more fundamental way. If she went to Ethan with the story preemptively, she was asking him to decide before he'd heard it from anyone else, which meant she was asking him to choose her publicly, and without the full information the town would eventually hand him. That was not the kind of choosing she wanted. She wanted him to hear the worst version of the story, and choose anyway if he chose. If he chose. That if sat in her chest for the rest of the afternoon like a stone. Ethan came in for supper at 6, and read the room immediately. She could see it in the half-second assessment he did when he came through the door, the way his eyes moved to Clara's face and stayed there a beat too long. "What happened?" he said. "Eat first," Clara said. "Clara." "Sit down, Ethan. The food is hot." He sat. Rosa sat. Lily sat, looking between the adults with the focused attention of a child who knew that something important was being managed over her head and was filing everything away for later processing. They ate. It was not a comfortable meal. Lily, responding to some instinct, was quieter than usual, which was itself a kind of loudness, the silence of a bright, watchful child, deciding whether to ask the question she was already formulating. After supper, Rosa took Lily to help with the dishes, and Clara and Ethan went to the front room, and Clara told him. She told him plainly. The whole thing. What Rosa had said. What Thornton's man had done. What the town was now saying. She told him about Robert Hadley, the full truth of it. Not just the outline she'd given on the road to Billings, but all of it, including the things that were hardest to say out loud. That she had loved Robert, or believed she had. That she had been humiliated by how he left, not just hurt, humiliated publicly, in a town small enough that the whole thing had been visible to everyone who knew her name. That she had spent a year afterward wondering if there was something in her that had caused it. Something not enough. Ethan sat across from her and listened without interrupting. When she finished, the room was quiet. That's what they're saying, she said. Some version of it cleaned up for church company. The point isn't the details. The point is, Thornton is trying to make you look like a fool for trusting me, and if it works, it undermines everything we've built here legally and practically. She held his gaze. I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from someone who was enjoying the telling. Ethan said nothing for a long moment. Then he stood up. He crossed to the window. He stood there with his back to her, one hand on the frame, looking at the dark yard. Ethan, she said. Give me a minute, he said. She gave him the minute. When he turned around, his face had the particular quality she recognized from the fence line from the barn conversation about Thornton. The quality of a man who has processed something fully and come out the other side of it already, who doesn't need more time because he knows what he thinks. Robert Hadley is a coward, he said. Clara blinked. He left a woman he claimed to love because her family hit hard times, Ethan said. That's not a complicated story. That's a coward making a coward's choice. He looked at her steadily. And Caleb Thornton is using a coward's choice as a weapon because he has no other weapons left. He came back to his chair, sat down. That tells me something. What does it tell you? Clara asked. That he's losing, Ethan said. Men with real weapons don't need to use other people's old wounds. Clara looked at him. Her throat was doing something she was not going to let it do in front of him. You're not angry, she said. I'm furious, he said. Not at you. Ethan. Clara. He leaned forward. Did you misrepresent yourself to anyone on this ranch? No, she said. Did you take anything that wasn't yours to take? No. Did you do a single thing in the last 6 weeks that was not exactly what you said it was? She looked at him. No. Then we have nothing to discuss about your past, he said. What Robert Hadley's family says is the opinion of people who let a good woman walk out the door without fighting for her. I don't put much stock in the opinions of people like that. The room was very quiet. Something in Clara's chest that had been held tight for approximately 7 years, released without announcement. Just let go, like a knot undone from the inside. She looked down at her hands. I am not easy, she said quietly. I am aware of that. I am direct when some people prefer indirect. I reorganize things without asking. I form opinions quickly, and I hold them. Clara. His voice was quiet and absolute. I know who you are. I've been watching you every day for 6 weeks. I don't need someone in Cedar Hollow to tell me who you are. She looked up. He was watching her with that same look, the one that had moved under the surface like water under ice. Except this time, it was not under anything. This time, it was right there on the surface, unguarded. Terrifying in its openness for a man who had been guarded for so long. I am sorry, he said. For the station. For making you feel unwanted in a place you had already made your own before I had the sense to see it. Clara held his gaze. That's the second time you've apologized, she said. I'll apologize as many times as it takes to mean something, he said. It meant something the first time, she said. They sat across from each other in the lamplit room. Then Lily appeared in the doorway with Rosa behind her, wearing the expression of a woman who had tried to keep a 6-year-old occupied and had done her best. Lily looked at her father, looked at Clara, looked at the specific quality of the space between them. "Are you going to kiss her?" she asked Ethan. "Lily," Rosa started. "I'm asking," Lily said reasonably. "Because if you're going to, you should, and if you're not, you should still probably say something because Clara's been very patient." Ethan looked at his daughter with an expression that was caught precisely between mortification and something that wanted very badly to laugh. Clara looked at the table. "Bed," Ethan said. "That's not an answer," Lily said. "It's the only answer you're getting tonight," he said. "Bed. Now." Lily assessed the situation, determined she had done what was required of her, and allowed Rosa to guide her down the hall. Though she looked back once, with the expression of someone who fully expected to receive a full report in the morning. The door to her room closed. Ethan and Clara sat in the silence she left behind. Then Clara said, "She is remarkable." "She is exhausting," Ethan said. "Same thing," Clara said. He almost laughed. Didn't quite. The next morning, Cedar Hollow delivered on Thornton's intentions. It started with the way people looked at her when she went out to the supply wagon. The woman at the mercantile, who had always been perfectly civil, went a degree colder. A man outside the feed store said something to his companion when she passed that she didn't hear clearly but understood in tone. 3 women she recognized from the church that Lily had mentioned stopped their conversation when she walked by and resumed it in a lower register, and she felt the shape of the pause like something physical. Clara kept her chin level and her pace even and bought the provisions and loaded the wagon and drove back to the ranch. She was unloading when she heard a horse coming up the road fast. It was not Ethan. He had ridden out to the north range at first light. It was Tom Briggs, old Tom who helped with the heavy work when his back allowed it, who had always been a quiet and decent man in Clara's experience of him. He climbed down from his horse with an urgency that sat wrong on his usual measured manner. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "I need to talk to you." "Come inside," she said. He wouldn't come inside. He stood in the yard with his hat in his hands and the urgency working in his face. "I owe you and Ethan an explanation," he said, "about the loan." Clara went still. "I was the one who told Briggs about the note," Tom said. "Harlan Briggs, my cousin." He couldn't meet her eyes. "Last fall, when things were looking thin, Harlan said he knew someone who might lend Ethan money at good terms. No pressure. I thought I was helping. I didn't know." He stopped. "I didn't know Harlan was working for Thornton. Not then. I found out 2 weeks ago. And then the legal letter came and I—" He looked up. "I should have said something sooner. I was afraid Ethan would think I'd done it on purpose." Clara looked at him. "Did you?" she asked. "God, no," he said. "Ethan Walker is the best man I know. His daddy was before him." His voice had gone rough. "I'm telling you because you need to know. Because if this goes to court, Garrett needs to know how Thornton got the information about the ranch's position. I'm willing to say it to a lawyer if it helps." Clara crossed the yard to him. "Tom," she said, "look at me." He did. "You made a mistake by trusting family who didn't deserve the trust," she said. "That's different from betrayal. What you're doing right now, coming here and telling this, that is the thing that matters." His jaw worked. "Ethan might not see it's that way." "Let me tell Ethan," she said. "Let me explain it. Can you write down exactly what happened? Dates, what was said when you understood what Harlan was doing. Garrett will need it in writing." Tom nodded. He sat down on the porch step right there and produced a stub of pencil from his coat pocket. He wrote it out. Clara waited. When he handed her the paper, she folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket. "You did the right thing coming here," she said. He mounted his horse. He looked at her from up there with the expression of a man who has set down something heavy and doesn't quite know what to do with his hands now that they're empty. "You're good for this ranch," he said. "And for him." He rode out. Clara stood in the yard. She thought about how Thornton had gotten his information. Through Harlan Briggs. Through old Tom's misplaced trust in his own family. Through the ordinary, unglamorous mechanism of one person telling another person a thing they shouldn't have, not out of malice, but out of a misguided attempt to help. And Thornton had taken that ordinary human moment and built a legal weapon out of it. The difference between a man like Thornton and a man like Ethan Walker, Clara thought, was not power or intelligence. It was what a man chose to do with the information he had about other people's vulnerabilities. She went inside. She sat down at the table and wrote everything up. Tom's statement, what it meant for the legal case, how Garrett could use the chain of information to demonstrate that Thornton had built his claim on intelligence obtained through manipulation of a third party. She wrote it in the clear, precise style she used for the accounts. No excess, no emotion, just the shape of the thing. Then she went to find Lily. What happened next happened at church. It was the following Sunday, and Clara had debated going. The practical part of her said that going while the stories were circulating was the correct move. Absence looked like confirmation. Presence made people look you in the eye. The part of her that was still human and tired said that sitting in a room full of people who had been told a story about her and hadn't decided yet whether to believe it was one of the less pleasant ways to spend a morning. She went anyway. She sat beside Lily, who took her hand the moment they sat down in the pew with the matter-of-fact ease of a child who has decided where she belongs and is not interested in other opinions on the matter. Ethan sat on Lily's other side. The service was ordinary, afterward was not. They were on the church steps when Marion Holt, not Mrs. Holt, from the Billings trading post, but her sister-in-law, the woman with the practiced mouth from the dry goods store, appeared with two other women and the specific energy of people who have arranged themselves for a moment they've been anticipating. "Mr. Walker," Marion said, "I wonder if you've had time to consider the things people have been saying." She looked at Clara with the bright, careful precision of someone who has sharpened this particular look for a specific purpose. "About your arrangement here." Ethan looked at her. "I have," he said. Marion nodded with the expression of a woman about to offer something she has decided is a kindness. "People are concerned. The reputation of your household. What it means for Lily growing up with Miss Whitfield," Ethan said. "Not Marion. Clara." He looked at Clara and then back at Marion with the particular quality of a man who has thought about this moment and is done thinking. Is a woman who came to this territory with nothing, who was treated with less courtesy than she deserved when she arrived, who rebuilt this ranch's accounts from disorder into something I can stand behind, who has given my daughter back her laugh, and who stood in my yard and told a man twice her age and 10 times her resources exactly where things stood." He paused. "What concerns me about my household, Mrs. Holt, is that it took me 6 weeks longer than it should have to say that out loud." The steps were very quiet. Marion's expression had done something complicated. From behind them, the old man who had laughed in the dry goods store was there again. Apparently he attended the same church and he made the same sound. Low appreciation. The sound of a man who has waited a long time for something said correctly. Furthermore, Ethan said, still calm, still level, the way he said hard things. "If anyone in this town has specific information they believe is relevant to my household's reputation, I invite them to bring it to Thomas Garrett in Billings, who is currently reviewing the business practices of the man most responsible for spreading those concerns. He's been very interested in what people have to say." Marion took one step back. The two women with her found somewhere else to look. Ethan turned to Clara. She was looking at him with an expression she could not entirely control. Something had gotten through the calm. Something she hadn't planned on, and he saw it, and whatever he saw in her face did something to his. Lily pressed against Clara's side and looked up at her with the satisfied expression of a child who has just watched justice operate. "Can we get pie?" Lily asked. Ethan looked at his daughter, looked at Clara. Something settled in his face that had been unsettled for a very long time. "Yes," he said. "We can get pie." The legal case broke wide open on Wednesday. Garrett wired from Billings. He had presented Tom Briggs's written statement to the court, along with the original loan document and a formal complaint about the chain of information that led to Thornton's fabricated collateral claim. The judge on the case. A different judge, not Albright, because Garrett had filed a conflict of interest motion and had it granted, which told Clara everything she needed to know about how long Garrett had been waiting for this particular fight, had requested a formal hearing in 3 weeks. But that was not the most important thing in the wire. The most important thing was the last line: Thornton's lawyers have filed a motion to withdraw. Case proceeding without their representation. Ethan read the wire at the kitchen table. He read it twice. He set it down. "What does it mean?" Lily asked. She was eating breakfast. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth, watching her father's face. "It means Mr. Thornton's lawyers don't want to stand in front of a judge and defend a case they know is fabricated," Clara said. She looked at Ethan. "It means he's withdrawing." "He's not done," Ethan said. "Men like Thornton don't withdraw. They regroup." "They do," Clara agreed. "But right now this specific case is over, and the auction clears in 4 days, and the note is covered." She held his gaze. "He can regroup. He just won't have the legal leverage or the financial pressure when he does. He'll have to find a different way." "And we'll handle a different way when it comes," Ethan said. "Yes," she said. "We will." Lily went back to her breakfast with the equanimity of someone who has processed a large amount of information and decided that the people in charge of things are handling them adequately. That evening after supper, Ethan found Clara at the window of her small room off the kitchen. She was not sitting on her cot. She was standing at the glass looking out at the dark yard, the west-facing window showing her nothing but stars. He knocked on the open door. She turned. He came in. He had never come into this room. He had always stood at the doorframe. Tonight he came in and stood in the middle of the floor and looked at her with the look that was no longer under anything. "I told you when this was over, I wanted to talk about something that wasn't the ranch," he said. She waited. "I am trying to figure out how to say this correctly," he said, "because I have said things incorrectly to you before, and the cost of that was significant, and I don't want to do it again." "Then say it plainly," she said. "You know I prefer plain." He looked at her. "I love you," he said. The room was very still. "I don't know exactly when," he said. "It wasn't one moment. It was you at the table at 5 in the morning with my papers. You in the barn with your hands around a fence rail. You standing in my yard telling Caleb Thornton that you were not temporary." He stopped. It was Lily's face. "Every single morning when she comes to find you before she's fully awake, because she needs to know you're still here." His voice had gone quieter. "It was every time you said we and meant it." Clara's throat was doing the thing she hadn't let it do before. She let it do it now. "Ethan," she said, "I am not asking you to feel the same," he said quickly. "I am not putting that on you. I have done enough putting things on you without asking. I just needed you to know, because you said you valued honesty, and this is the most honest thing I have." He held her gaze. "You came here, and I turned you away, and you stayed anyway. And in 6 weeks, you have changed every single thing about how this ranch runs, and what this house feels like, and who my daughter is becoming." His voice broke slightly on the last part, not fully, but enough. "I turned you away at that station because I was afraid of exactly this. Of wanting someone this much. Of knowing what it would cost to lose it." Clara crossed the room. She stopped in front of him. Close. Close enough that she had to look up to see his face. "I told Thornton I wasn't temporary," she said. "I remember." "I wasn't saying it for him," she said. His breath came out slowly. "Clara, I came here expecting a husband," she said. "I got sent away. I stayed because a little girl grabbed my hand, and because I am not the kind of woman who lets other people decide her worth." She held his gaze. "And then I fell in love with a ranch and a set of poorly organized accounts, and a man who laughs like he's surprised by it every time." She paused. "And his extraordinary, exhausting daughter." Ethan Walker put his hand against her face. Just that. His palm against her cheek, rough, calloused, warm. She put her hand over his. "Don't turn me away again," she said quietly. "Never," he said, like a fact, like something so certain it didn't need volume. He kissed her. Outside in the hallway, there was the very careful, very quiet sound of small feet creeping back to bed with the satisfied speed of a child who has just confirmed that the thing she had been hoping for had finally definitively happened. Neither of them mentioned the footsteps, but Clara felt the smile before she could stop it. And Ethan, who knew his daughter, felt it too. The hearing before the judge happened 2.5 weeks later, Ethan went with Garrett. Clara went with Ethan. The courtroom in Billings was small and wood-paneled and smelled of linseed oil and the particular formality of a room where people came to have things decided. Thornton was there, without his lawyers. With a new set of lawyers who had less history with the case and less certainty in their faces. He looked at Clara when she came in, and his expression was the most honest thing she had seen from him. The expression of a man encountering a variable he had failed to account for and knowing in his bones that it had cost him the calculation. Garrett was magnificent. How was a small man, compact and precise, with the deliberate economy of someone who had learned long ago that the lawyer who uses fewer words controls the room. He laid out the case in 20 minutes. Original loan document. No collateral. Chain of information showing how Thornton had obtained knowledge of the ranch's financial position through manipulation of a third party. Tom Briggs's written statement. The full operating history of the Walker Ranch in perfectly organized files. Clara had organized those files. She sat in the courtroom and watched the judge read through them and thought about the morning she had sat down at 5 a.m. with a lamp and a stack of chaos and decided that a ranch needed to be able to defend itself. The judge ruled in 40 minutes. The collateral claim was dismissed. The fabricated documentation was noted in the record. There was a comment from the bench about the business practices of parties who used legal mechanisms to pressure neighboring landowners, which was not a ruling, but was. Clara noted the kind of comment that tended to follow a man's name into future proceedings. Outside on the courthouse steps, Garrett shook Ethan's hand, and then to Clara's slight surprise turned and shook hers. "Your records," he said. "I have been practicing law for 22 years. Those were the cleanest operating documents I have ever walked into a hearing with." "Thank you," Clara said. "I'm serious," Garrett said. "If you ever want to do something with that skill professionally, there are lawyers in this state who would pay well for it." Ethan looked at her. She looked at Ethan. "I'll keep it in mind," she said. Thornton was on the steps below them talking to his new lawyers in a low, controlled voice. He looked up once as Ethan and Clara came down the steps. He looked at the two of them, at the specific way they moved together, not quite touching, but with the unmistakable quality of people who had decided something, and he nodded once. Not concession. Acknowledgement. The nod of a man who recognized when a game had gone to someone else and was already thinking about the next game. "He'll try again," Ethan said quietly as they walked to the wagon. "I know," Clara said. "We'll be ready." "We will," she said. He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand under her elbow, the ordinary courtesy of it. But he didn't let go right away. He stood beside the wagon with his hand on her arm and looked up at her for a moment. "Marry me," he said. Clara looked down at him. "We've tried that arrangement before," she said. "It didn't start well. It started exactly as badly as it needed to," he said, "so we could get here." She held his gaze. He held hers. "Yes," she said. He climbed up beside her. He picked up the reins. "Lily is going to be insufferable about this," he said. "Lily," Clara said, "has been planning this since the train station." "I know," he said. "She told you. She told me the second morning you were there," he said. "She came downstairs at 5 in the morning and found me at the kitchen table with my coffee and said very seriously, 'Papa, I think Clara is supposed to be ours.'" He kept his eyes on the road. "I told her it was complicated. She said things were only as complicated as people made them." He paused. She was 6. Clara looked at the road ahead of them. "She was right," Clara said. "She usually is," he said. "It's alarming." They drove home through the Montana afternoon with the mountains enormous on the horizon and the sky wide and pale gold, and the road stretching out ahead of them toward Cedar Hollow and the ranch, and a little girl who was at this precise moment almost certainly wearing a hole in the porch floor waiting for news. Clara thought about the train station, about picking up her suitcase, about 3 steps toward a train she had not taken. She thought about small hands grabbing hers. "Be my mommy." She thought about a man who had turned her away, and then slowly, day by day, word by word, argument by argument, crisis by crisis, had turned back toward her with the particular courage of someone who is afraid of the exact thing they are doing, and chooses to do it anyway. She thought I came here expecting a husband. I found something harder and better than a husband. I found a partner. She thought I came here expecting to be chosen. Instead, I chose. The wagon turned off the main road onto the Walker Ranch Drive. Lily was on the porch. She was sitting very still with her book in her lap, but she was not reading it. She had been watching the road. When the wagon appeared, she stood up. When they got close enough for her to see their faces, she put the book down. Then she ran. She came flying off of the porch and across the yard at a dead run, her braid coming loose and her boots hitting the hard ground with the absolute commitment of a child who has decided that running is the only appropriate speed for this moment. And she hit Clara the instant Clara climbed down from the wagon, both arms around her waist and her face pressed into Clara's coat. "You're home," she said, muffled. "We're home," Clara said. Lily looked up. She looked at her father's face, at Clara's face, at the specific quality of the space between them which had fundamentally and permanently changed from what it was this morning. Her face did the thing, the enormous, uncomplicated 6-year-old thing, joy, with no layers to it, joy that has not yet learned how to protect itself. "Did you say yes?" she demanded. Ethan looked at Clara. "She said yes," he said. Lily made a sound that was not quite a word, but was the most eloquent thing Clara had heard in Montana. Then she grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the house because supper wasn't going to make itself, and there were things to celebrate. And Lily Walker had never once in her short life believed that good news was a thing you sat still with. Clara let herself be pulled. Behind her she heard Ethan's boots on the ground following, and the ranch settled around them all like something that had been waiting. The news of the engagement reached Cedar Hollow before Ethan and Clara did. That was the nature of small towns. A word spoken in Billings could outride a wagon by 3 hours if it found the right horse. By the time they turned onto the main street to pick up the week's provisions, 2 people had already stopped to look at them with expressions that suggested they knew something and were deciding how to arrange their faces around it. Lily, sitting between them on the wagon seat, noticed both looks immediately. "They know," she said. "Word travels," Ethan said. "Is that good or bad?" Lily asked. "Depends on the person doing the traveling," Clara said. Lily considered this with the gravity of someone filing it for future philosophical use. The mercantile was quiet when they went in. Clara went directly to the counter and gave her list to the proprietor, who was a man named George Aldous, who had always treated her with basic decency, even during the worst of the whispering weeks. He took her list without comment. But when he came back with the first armload of supplies, he set them down and said without preamble, "Heard about the Billings hearing. Heard Thornton's case fell apart." "It did," Clara said. He nodded slowly. "Heard other things too." He glanced at her left hand, where there was not yet a ring because there had not yet been time for a ring. But something in the way she and Ethan had walked in together apparently communicated the essential information. "Reckon congratulations are in order." "Reckon they are," Clara said. He put out his hand. She shook it. He went back for the rest of the supplies, and that was all that was said, but the handshake felt like something a small door opening where a larger one had been closed. Marion Holt was not in the mercantile. Clara did not ask after her. Some things would take longer than a court ruling to shift, and Clara had made her peace with that. What she had not made peace with what she discovered, she still needed to manage. Standing in the mercantile with Ethan loading crates beside her was the particular sensation of being seen by a whole town and not knowing which version of herself they were seeing. The woman Thornton had described. The woman she actually was. The woman who was about to become Clara Walker. She was thinking about this when the door opened and Robert Hadley walked in. Clara recognized him before she fully processed that he was there. The body does that, recognizes the shape of someone it has known before the mind has time to prepare a response. How was 30 now? He had always been a handsome man in the conventional sense, the kind of face that got taken at face value in rooms where face was the primary currency. He looked the same as she remembered, and also completely different in the way people look different when you have stopped seeing them through the lens of who you once were to each other. He stopped when he saw her. The sequence of his face was surprise, then calculation, Then the arrangement of something carefully neutral. "Clara," he said. The mercantile went quiet in that particular way, where everyone was pretending not to listen while listening with absolute attention. "Robert," she said. He crossed toward her. He had his hat in his hands, the same gesture she noticed that Ethan had used at the train station, though the two men could not have been more different in what the gesture cost them. For Robert, it was manners. For Ethan, it had been pain. "I heard you were in Montana," he said. "I'm here on business, family business." He paused. "I heard about what happened with the Walker arrangement. I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said pleasantly. "It resolved well." He glanced at Ethan, who had gone very still beside the crate he was loading. Not overtly still. The kind of still that people who didn't know Ethan Walker might not notice. Clara knew Ethan Walker. "I heard about the court case," Robert said, still in that careful voice. "That Thornton man had no right to bring your name into it." "No," Clara agreed. "He didn't." Robert looked at her hands again. At the left one specifically. Then he looked back at her face with an expression that was trying for casual and not quite making it. "You look well," he said. "I am well," she said. "I've thought," he said, and then stopped and started again with the particular verbal fumbling of a man who has rehearsed something and lost his place in it. "There are things I should have done differently. When things changed. I've thought about that." Clara looked at him. She looked at him the way she looked at the accounts, clearly, without flinching, without assigning more value to what she was seeing than it actually had. "Robert," she said, "I appreciate you saying that. I do." She kept her voice even and kind, because she was not cruel, and because he genuinely did not seem to know what he had thrown away, which was its own kind of loss she had no interest in adding to. "But the things that happened between us were a long time ago. I don't carry them anymore." "Maybe we could," he started. "I'm engaged," she said. The words landed with the clean precision of a well-thrown thing. Robert went still. "To Mr. Walker," she said. Not because he needed the specification, but because clarity was always better than ambiguity, and she was done with ambiguity. Robert's eyes moved to Ethan. Ethan set down the crate he was holding, not in a hurry, and turned and looked at Robert Hadley with an expression that was not hostile and not welcoming, and was entirely and simply the expression of a man who knew exactly where he stood. "Ethan Walker," Ethan said. He did not offer his hand. He did not need to. Robert looked between them. The calculation left his face. What replaced it was something more honest, the expression of a man looking at the specific shape of the thing he had walked away from, and understanding too late and too clearly what it actually was. "I see," he said. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Clara said, genuinely. "I mean that." He nodded once. He put his hat back on. He left without buying what he'd come for, which was, Clara noted, becoming a pattern for certain people in her vicinity. The mercantile exhaled. Ethan looked at her. "You all right?" he said quietly. "Yes," she said. And she was. She was genuinely, completely without performance. All right. He was the closing of a door I'd already walked away from. "It's done now." Ethan picked the crate back up. "Good," he said. "That's all you have to say?" she asked. "What else needs saying?" he said. She looked at him. I was right. Nothing else needed saying. That was one of the things she loved about him, his absolute economy with words, the way he never used 10 where 3 would do. The way the 3 he chose were always exactly right. Lily appeared from behind a barrel of dried goods where she had apparently been observing the entire exchange. "Was that the man from before?" she asked. "The one who left?" "Yes," Clara said. Lily studied the door he had exited through with the focused appraisal of someone rendering a considered verdict. "He looked like he had a stomachache," she said finally. "Serve him right." The old man by the door made his familiar sound. Ethan said, "Lily." "I'm just saying," Lily said. And she helped carry the smallest crate to the wagon without being asked, which was her version of demonstrating that she was capable of appropriate behavior when she chose it. The wedding was set for the second Saturday of May. Not because May was particularly significant, but because the spring auction would be completed by then, the legal matter was fully resolved, and the Walker Ranch would be for the first time in 3 years operating from a position of genuine stability rather than managed crisis. Clara had insisted on that. She would not build a marriage on a foundation that was still being repaired. Ethan had not argued. He understood her well enough by then to know that arguing with Clara Whitfield about the correct order of things was an exercise that cost energy and yielded nothing. The weeks between the Billings hearing and the wedding moved with the particular texture of a good kind of busy, full, purposeful, every day, requiring something. The spring cattle went to auction in Billings and came back as numbers in the ledger that finally cleanly covered everything outstanding. Garrett sent a final letter closing the case. The trading post agreement with Mrs. Holt in Billings was formalized in writing. Ethan hired a new foreman, a young man named Cal Briggs, no relation to Harlan, who came recommended by 3 ranchers in the Yellowstone Valley, and who on his first week fixed the section of north fence that kept working loose without being told to. Ethan came in for dinner that first Friday and told Clara about the fence. "I didn't ask him to," Ethan said. "He just saw it needed doing." "That's the one," Clara said. He looked at her across the table. "You already knew he was going to be right." "I read his recommendation letters," she said. "A man who 3 different ranchers describe as someone who finds work before work finds him. That's the one you hire." Ethan shook his head in the way he did when she had arrived at a conclusion before him through means that still slightly seemed to him like something other than ordinary human thinking. "You are going to do this for the rest of my life," he said. "Know things before you do," she said. "Probably." "And enjoy it," he said. "Enormously," she said. He almost laughed. The corner thing. She still looked for it, and it still made something warm happen in her chest, and she had stopped trying to prevent that. Lily had taken the wedding planning personally. She had views, specific, detailed, non-negotiable views about the flowers and the location, and what she herself intended to wear, which had been decided approximately 48 hours after the engagement was announced and had not wavered since. She wanted yellow flowers. She wanted the ceremony near the big cottonwood at the east edge of the property, because that was where she went to think, and she considered it the best spot on the ranch. She wanted to wear her blue dress, the good one, the one that Rosa had let out twice as Lily kept growing. "The cottonwood," Ethan said when she announced this. "Yes," Lily said. "It's a tree," Ethan said. "It's the best tree," Lily said. "And it's where I asked God to send someone good, and then Clara came." The room went very quiet. Ethan and Clara looked at each other over Lily's head. "You prayed there," Ethan said carefully. "Every Sunday for almost a year," Lily said with the matter-of-fact directness of a child who saw no reason to make a mystery of something she considered a straightforward transaction. "I asked for someone kind who would brush hair properly and know about things and not be scared of you." She looked at her father. "You scare some people." "I know," Ethan said. "Clara wasn't scared," Lily said. "So I knew she was the right one." A long silence. Clara said very quietly, "Lily." The little girl looked up at her. "Thank you," Clara said. Lily shrugged with the practiced casualness of someone who considers answered prayers a normal feature of an organized life. "You're welcome," she said. "Can we have the yellow flowers?" "Yes," Clara said. "We can have the yellow flowers." The morning of the wedding arrived, the way important mornings do, ordinary first, then suddenly not. Clara was awake before the sun. She lay on her cot in the small room off the kitchen, the same room she had slept in since the first night, though it had acquired over the months the quality of something genuinely hers. The Bible on the sill, and her hairbrush on the shelf, and a drawing Lily had made of the 3 of them tacked to the wall, and she listened to the ranch breathing around her. She thought about the train pulling into Cedar Hollow, the platform, the cold expression on a man's face, and the decision already made behind his eyes. She thought about picking up her suitcase. She thought about 3 steps. She thought about small hands. Rosa arrived at 7 with the yellow flowers, which she had driven 20 minutes from town to collect from the meadow she'd identified a week before. She arrived also with a dress, not a grand dress, Nothing that required a trunk to travel in, but a clean white cotton with simple eyelet trim that she had made herself from a length of fabric she had ordered from Billings 3 weeks ago without telling anyone. She had guessed Clara's measurements from the dresses she'd seen her in, and she had guessed correctly, the way women who have been paying careful attention always guess correctly. Clara stood in the kitchen while Rosa fastened the back and felt for the first time since this whole thing had begun something that was very close to overwhelmed. "Don't," Rosa said firmly. "Your eyes are going to go red and then you'll be annoyed about it all morning." "I'm not going to cry," Clara said. "Good," Rosa said. "Because I already did in the wagon on the way here, and one of us is enough." Clara laughed. Rosa finished the last button and stepped back and looked at her with the expression of a woman who has watched something unfold from the beginning and is allowing herself to be satisfied by how it ended. "You look exactly like what you are," Rosa said. "What's that?" Clara asked. "A woman who earned this," Rosa said. Lily appeared in the doorway in her blue dress with her hair braided and retied 3 times until it was exactly right. Clara could tell by the slight pink at Lily's ears that the precision had required effort, and she stopped and stared at Clara with her mouth slightly open. "You look like the pictures in my book," Lily said. "Which book?" Clara asked. "The illustrated one. The one you brought me from Billings." Lily came forward and took Clara's hand and studied her face with the careful seriousness of an art critic. "You look like the princess one." "I'm not a princess," Clara said. "I know," Lily said. "You're better." She squeezed Clara's hand. "You're mine." The word landed somewhere precise and permanent in Clara's chest. "Yes," she said. "I am." Ethan was waiting at the cottonwood. He had worn his best coat, the dark one, and he had brushed it himself and managed it adequately. He had his hat in his hands, that same gesture, but nothing like the station now. Nothing like that at all. He was standing straight and still, and watching the 3 of them come across the yard with an expression that did not try to be anything other than what it was. The Reverend Matthews from Cedar Hollow had come out at Ethan's request. He was a quiet man, practical and decent. The kind of minister who understood that the words of a ceremony mattered less than the truth behind them, and kept his services accordingly short. Tom Briggs was there, standing off to the side with his hat in his hands and his face carrying the particular expression of a man who had done something wrong and been forgiven for it, and was still in the process of forgiving himself, which is always the harder work. Clara had told Ethan about Tom's role in the Thornton situation herself the same day Tom came to confess it. Ethan had been silent for a long time after. Then he had said, "He should have told me sooner." "But I've known Tom Briggs since I was 7 years old. A man doesn't throw away 40 years because of one mistake made with good intentions." He had ridden out to see Tom the next day. Whatever passed between them had been sufficient. Tom was here now. That was sufficient. Cal Briggs, the new foreman, stood nearby with the respectful awkwardness of someone new to a family who has been invited into a significant moment and takes that invitation seriously. Old George Aldous from the Mercantile was there, which surprised Clara. He caught her look when she arrived and gave her the same direct nod he'd given when he shook her hand, which was his entire vocabulary of warmth and was more than enough. Mrs. Holt from the Billings trading post had driven out. She had not been invited because no one had thought to invite her, which meant she had heard and come on her own, which was its own kind of statement about what she had decided Clara Whitfield meant to the commerce and character of this particular stretch of Montana. It was not a large gathering. It was exactly the right gathering. The Reverend Matthews spoke simply and well. He spoke about partnership and trust, and the particular courage it took to choose someone not out of desperation or convention, but out of the clear-eyed recognition of who they actually were. He spoke about children and what it meant to give a child not just a parent, but a home. He spoke about the kind of love that built things rather than simply felt things, and Clara thought, standing under the cottonwood with the May air, cold and clean around them, and Lily's hand in hers, that she had never heard a more accurate description of what had happened on this ranch in the past 4 months. When the Reverend got to the vows, Ethan spoke them looking directly at her. Not past her, not at the Reverend, not at the assembled witnesses. At her. with the same directness she had offered him from the very beginning, now coming back at her with interest accumulated over months of watching and understanding and choosing over and over to choose. "I promise you partnership," he said, not reading from anything, his own words. Not the arrangement kind, the real kind where both people decide what needs doing and do it together. "I promise you honesty, even when it's inconvenient, because I have watched you handle inconvenient honesty better than anyone I have ever known." He paused. "I promise you this land and this house and everything in them, because they are already half yours by the work of your own hands, and making it legal is just catching up with what's already true." He looked at her steadily. "And I promise you, I will never again let fear make me turn away from the best thing I have ever been offered." Clara's throat was doing the thing. She let it. "I promise you honesty," she said when it was her turn. "About the accounts and about everything else. I promise you partnership in the real sense, which I have learned on this ranch means showing up before sunrise and working past dark and doing it again the next day. Not because someone asks, but because the work matters." She looked at him. "I promise to argue with you when I think you're wrong, which will be occasionally." A pause. "And I promise Lily, a mother who shows up. Every morning, every argument, every question she will ever think to ask." She felt Lily's hand tighten in hers. "I am done traveling. I have arrived. This is where I stay." The Reverend Matthews pronounced them married. Ethan kissed her with the same economy he brought to everything important. No performance, no audience management. Just the real thing, direct and certain and warm. Lily made the sound again. The wordless one. Joy without armor. Tom Briggs cleared his throat noisily. Mrs. Holt said to no one in particular, "About time." Old George Aldous from the Mercantile laughed quiet and genuine, not the appreciating from a distance laugh, but a real one, the laugh of a man who has watched something resolve the right way. They ate outside under the cottonwood. Rosa had cooked for 2 days, and it showed. Lily ate 3 biscuits and talked without stopping for approximately 90 minutes, covering topics that ranged from the name she had decided to give the next calf born on the ranch to a detailed philosophical position on whether Duchess the barn cat had improved her character since the involuntary bath incident, a question which remained Lily conceded open. Ethan sat beside Clara, with his arm along the back of her chair, not around her. Just there, the casual ease of a man who has stopped managing the distance between himself and the person beside him, and ate and listened, and occasionally caught Clara's eye with the small private acknowledgement of 2 people who have achieved something together that they both understand the cost of. The afternoon wore on. People drifted with warmth toward their wagons and their horses. Rosa packed up the remaining food with the efficiency of a woman who had been planning to do exactly this and knew how long it would take. Cal Briggs shook Ethan's hand and touched the brim of his hat at Clara and said economically, "Good day, ma'am." And it was the first time anyone in Cedar Hollow had called her that in a way that did not have a knife in it. Tom Briggs was the last to leave. He stood in front of Clara in the yard with his hat going through his hands the way it had when he came to confess about the loan, and she thought this man is going to spend a long time carrying something he should have put down already. "Tom," she said. He looked at her. "You came and told the truth when it cost you something," she said. "That's what matters. The rest is done." He looked at his hat. "Still wish I'd—" "I know," she said. "But you didn't know. And when you found out you came. That's who you are." She held his gaze. "That's who you're going to keep being." He nodded. Something in his face settled. Not all the way because some things take longer than an afternoon, but enough. He mounted his horse. He rode out. The yard was quiet. Lily had fallen asleep on the porch bench, with her head on a folded blanket. Rosa had left her good blue dress slightly dusty at the hem, in the way of dresses worn by children who do not permit important occasions to interfere with fundamental activities like running. Her braid had come mostly undone. She was breathing with the absolute commitment to unconsciousness of a child who has burned through an enormous amount of energy, being very, very happy. Clara and Ethan stood in the yard and looked at her. "She's been planning this since the train station," Clara said. "Before the train station," Ethan said. She was writing letters to me for 6 months telling me I needed to try again. She was 6. Her spelling was... He paused. Creative. Clara stared at him. She wrote you letters, she said. I have them, he said. They are mostly illegible. The argument is clear. He looked at his daughter. She said in the most recent one that she didn't care who I found as long as they were brave and good and didn't burn the biscuits. Clara pressed her lips together. I burned the biscuits once, she said. Lily remembers everything, he said. Clara looked at the sleeping child, at the loose braid, at the dusty hem, at the small face in complete repose, nothing held back, nothing managed. Just a little girl who had wanted something and waited for it, and was now so satisfied by its arrival that she had run herself straight into sleep in the middle of her own celebration. She thought about a train platform, a small voice, small hands. Be my mommy. She thought about what it cost to ask that, to be 6 years old and motherless and watching a stranger walk away and deciding with everything you had to stop her. She thought about what it cost to stay. The pride she had swallowed, and the doors she had knocked on, and the problems she had solved, and the ground she had held when it would have been easier to give it up. The mornings at 5 a.m. with a lamp and a stack of disordered papers. The fence rail, the accounts, the Billings courtroom, the yard with Caleb Thornton, the woman at the dry goods store, the man at the train station who was Robert Hadley's ghost. She had not held that ground for a man. She had held it for herself. And then she had offered the holding freely to a family that needed it. That was the difference. That was the whole difference. Ethan, she said. I want to carry her in, she said. He looked at her. She's heavier than she looks. I know, Clara said. She crossed to the porch. She gathered Lily up from the bench and the child stirred briefly, half awake, her arms going automatically around Clara's neck in the boneless, trusting grip of a child who knows exactly where they are, and carried her inside and down the hall and into the small room with the drawings on the wall and the books stacked by the bed, and laid her down and pulled the quilt up and stood in the dim light for a moment with her hand resting lightly on Lily's hair. Lily's eyes opened a fraction. Clara, she said, blurry with sleep. I'm here, Clara said. Lily said. Her eyes closed. Good. Clara stood there until the breathing deepened back into sleep. Then she came back out. Ethan was in the front room. He had the lamp lit and the accounts spread on the table, which made her smile before she could stop it. That on their wedding day, this man had instinctively returned to the same table where half their best conversations had happened. Some people put their love into gestures, and some people put it into work, and some people, the best people, understood that for certain couples, the work was the gesture, and always had been. He looked up when she came in. She's asleep, Clara said. Good, he said. She's been going since before sunrise. Clara sat down across from him. She looked at the papers on the table. New issue, she said. Old issue finally solvable, he said. He turned one page toward her. The South Fence maintenance contract. The one with the fraudulent billing. I want to recover the $60. You could, she said. Garrett could write a letter. I don't want Garrett to do it, he said. I want to do it myself. She looked at him. I know the man, Ethan said. He's not Thornton's creature. He just made a choice to bill for work he didn't complete and thought I wouldn't check. He paused. I want to sit down with him and tell him what I know and give him the chance to make it right. Man to man, no lawyers. And if he won't, Clara said. Then Garrett, Ethan said. Clara considered this. That's the right way to do it, she said. I thought so, he said. They sat across from each other at the table where they had sat so many times with the accounts between them, with the Thornton problem, with Tom Briggs's statement with the Billings numbers, and it felt like every previous version of this moment, the same lamp, the same table, the same two people, and also nothing like any of those moments at all, because something had shifted underneath everything, and the shift was permanent, and they both felt it. I have a question, Clara said. Ask it. That first morning, she said, when you came downstairs at 5:30 and found me at your table with your papers and your lamp and your coffee. She held his gaze. What did you think? He was quiet for a moment. I thought, he said carefully, that I had made a very significant mistake at the train station. That's what you thought. That's what I knew, he said. What I thought was considerably more complicated and took another 3 weeks to work out fully. What was the complicated part? He looked at her. That you were not going to let me keep being afraid, he said, and that I had spent 3 years building an entire life around being afraid, and I did not know who I was without it. He paused. Turns out I'm someone who can fix a fence and run a ranch and raise a daughter and love a woman who reorganizes my papers without asking. He held her gaze. Turns out that's more than I thought I was. Clara looked at him across the lamplit table. You were always that, she said quietly. You just needed someone to stop leaving you alone with it. The room was warm. Outside, the Montana night was cold and deep and enormous, the kind of dark that makes stars necessary. Inside, the lamp was steady, and the house was quiet, and down the hall, a little girl slept in the uncomplicated knowledge that the thing she had asked for had arrived and was staying. This was the thing Clara had not been able to name on her first night in the small room off the kitchen, lying on the cot with her hand on her Bible, and the stars in her west-facing window, and Lily's happy voice somewhere down the hall saying good night. She could name it now. It was not relief. It was not safety, though it was that too. It was not even love, though it was absolutely that. It was belonging. The particular hard-won chosen belonging of a person who did not inherit their place in the world, but built it. Board by board, account by account, fence, rail by fence rail, conversation by conversation, morning by morning, long before anyone offered them a title for it. She had arrived in Cedar Hollow as a mail-order bride who had been refused. She was leaving that story as something that could not be refused. A woman who had decided where she belonged and stayed until the belonging was real. 3 years later, the Walker Ranch was the most productive operation in that part of Cascade County. The south fence got rebuilt properly that summer. The supply agreement with Mrs. Holt held and expanded. Cal Briggs turned out to be, as Clara had predicted from the recommendation letters, the kind of foreman who found work before work found him, and under his management, the herd grew steadily, and the accounting stayed clean. Tom Briggs came by twice a month to help with the heavy labor, his back cooperating more consistently, now that he was not carrying something else heavy alongside it. Caleb Thornton made one more attempt in the fall. A different mechanism. A water rights claim, this time on the Yellowstone tributary. Garrett handled it in 2 weeks. The claim was withdrawn without a hearing. Thornton did not attempt a third time. Ethan said when the withdrawal notice arrived, "He's found someone easier." Clara said, "Then someone else needs a Garrett." Ethan looked at her. "You want to help them? I want whoever Thornton goes after next to have organized records," she said, "so that when they need to defend themselves, they can." He looked at her for a long moment. "Thomas Garrett has been saying for 2 years he needs a clerk with your particular skill set," he said, "part-time, for ranchers in the valley who can't afford full legal representation but need someone who can read a contract and spot what's wrong with it." Clara was quiet. "You've been thinking about this," she said. "Since the day Garrett shook your hand on the courthouse steps," Ethan said. "He looked at you the way people look at something they need and haven't found yet." "The ranch." "The ranch runs," he said. "Cal runs the ranch. You run the books, which you can do in 2 hours what used to take me 2 days. He held her gaze. "You could do more, Clara. You have always been able to do more. I am not going to be the thing that stops you from doing it." She looked at him. She thought about what it meant for a man in 1885 in Montana to say those words to his wife and mean them and not take them back. She thought about how rare it was. She thought about how she had known from the very first letter from the single-word partnership that this was what he had meant by it, even before he fully knew what it would cost him to live up to it. It had not cost him. That was the truth she kept arriving at. It had not cost him anything to let her be fully herself. It had given him everything. "Let me think about it," she said. "Take the time you need," he said. She took 2 days. Then she wrote to Garrett. Lily was 9 years old when Clara began the part-time work with Garrett's office. She was 12 when the position expanded. She was 15 when 3 different ranching families and Cascade County families who had faced Thornton-style legal pressure and survived it with their land intact because Clara had organized their records and identified their vulnerabilities before the attacks came, pooled their resources, and wrote a letter to the Billings courthouse recommending that the county formally recognize the need for a designated land records advocate, a position that did not exist yet but very clearly should. The letter cited one name. Lily at 15 brought the letter to Clara from the front room table where the post had been left. She stood in the kitchen doorway, holding it with the ceremonial seriousness of someone delivering something important. "I think this is about you," she said. Clara dried her hands and read it. She read it twice. She set it down. She stood in the kitchen, where she had first made biscuits on an evening in 1882, when she was 23 years old, and had been turned away at a train station, and had nowhere to go, and had decided with the particular stubbornness of a woman who refuses to let other people determine her value to stay. She stood in the kitchen that was hers now, the house that was hers, the ranch that was hers, the daughter who was hers, the man who was hers, not by arrangement and not by desperation, but by the free and daily and fully informed choice of 2 people who knew each other completely and chose each other anyway. Lily was watching her face. "Is it good?" Lily asked. Clara looked at her daughter. At the face that had grown from 6-year-old uncertainty into 15-year-old clarity. The same eyes, the same reading intelligence, the same directness that had once looked at a stranger on a train platform and seen something nobody else had thought to look for. "It is very good," Clara said. Lily crossed the kitchen and read over her shoulder. "They're right," Lily said when she finished. "You should do it." "I'm considering it," Clara said. "You've already decided," Lily said. "You just want to think it through 3 more times to make sure you're right, which you already are." Clara looked at her. "You are exactly like your father," she said. "I know," Lily said. "You love that about us." Clara put her arm around her daughter's shoulders, pulled her in, felt the specific solid warmth of a 15-year-old who was still, despite her considerable opinions about everything, willing to lean. "Yes," Clara said. "I do." Ethan came in for dinner an hour later and found the letter on the table and read it and looked up at Clara with the expression she had first seen on a courthouse step. Uncomplicated, no layers. Just a man being proud of the woman he chose and not trying to be anything other than exactly that. "Well," he said. "Well," she said. "Are you going to accept?" "Yes," she said. He nodded. That was all. That was enough. Because that was how they were. That was how they had always been. 2 people who understood each other completely and did not require more words than the situation actually needed, because they had spent years building the kind of trust where the unnecessary words were already understood, and what remained was only the true thing, said plain between equals. Lily set the table for dinner. Ethan washed up at the basin. Clara stirred the pot on the stove and listened to her family moving in the house around her and thought about the train, about the platform, about a cold expression and a decision already made, and a suitcase in both hands and 3 steps toward a train she did not take. She thought about what would have happened if she had taken those 3 steps. She thought about who she would be now in some other story, some other life. She could not see it. She could not see it because this life, this specific hard-won chosen life, had filled every available space in her, completely the way belonging does when it is real, when it has been built, and not merely inherited, when it has been chosen every day by people who know exactly what they are choosing and have decided it is worth everything it cost. She could not imagine another story. There was no other story. There was only this, a woman who arrived expecting to be turned away, and instead turned toward everything she was capable of being. A man who was afraid of the right thing for exactly long enough and then stopped being afraid. A little girl who saw the truth before anyone else did and refused with the absolute uncompromising clarity of a child who has not yet learned that wanting something deeply means you might not get it, to let the right person walk away. The biscuits came out perfect. They always did now. And around the table that had held so many hard conversations, and so many solved problems, and so many ordinary evenings that accumulated day by day into an extraordinary life. The Walker family ate dinner together as they had the night before, and the night before that, and as they would the night to come, and the night after, and every night that followed. A woman who had been refused had become the woman who was chosen, not by circumstance, not by luck, not by the grace of someone else's decision, by her own two hands, and her own clear eyes, and her own refusal, absolute and final and unshakable, to let anyone else write the ending of her story. That was the truth. Cedar Hollow learned. That was the truth that outlasted Thornton's schemes, and Robert Hadley's cowardice, and every whisper, and every cold look, and every practiced smile on every practiced mouth that had tried to tell her who she was. A woman's worth is not assigned by the people who refuse her. It is proven by everything she builds after she decides to stay.